Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Caroline Culver, Chairman of the Resources and Place Scrutiny Committee. Members of the committee present this evening are Councillors Ross McKinnon, Anthony Amatharaj, Billy Drummond, Alan Macro, Chris Reed, Richard Sumner, and I've got Howard Wollaston on here, but I don't see him. Do we know if he's joining us, Councillor McKinnon? Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Laura Coyle will also be joining us, but is running late due to work commitments. Portfolio holders with us this evening includes Council Leader Jeff Brooks, Nigel Foote and Stuart Gawley. Also attending for the call-in items are Councillors Paul Kander, Owen Jeffrey, Tony Vickers via Zoom and Stephanie Stevenson in the chamber. We will also be joined online in due course by Councillor Vicky Paul. Councillor Justin Pemberton is attending as ward member for agenda item 3B. Council officers present to advise and support the meeting are as follows: Claire Lawrence, Executive Director for Place, Sarah Clark, Executive Director for Resources, Martin Sargent, Service Director for Strategy and Governance, Andrew Olty, Network Manager for Highways, April Pebbody, Service Director for Community Services, Jude Thomas, Sport and Leisure Manager, Drew McHenry, Principal Sport and Leisure Officer, John Winstanley, Service Director for Environment, Emily Ashton-Jelly, Climate and Ecological Emergency Team Leader, and Richard Howroyd, Service Lead for Procurement and Commissioning. Stephen Chard is the clerk for the meeting and Gordon Oliver is the Zoom host. Tonight's meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. If we hear the fire alarm, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exits. The assembly point is the Dolphin Car Park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Finally, I would like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. We may not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we are always respectful of others' views. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted? Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies, please?
We do indeed, Chairman. So apologies received from Councillors Jeremy Cotton and Eric Pattenden. The substitutes attending Councillor Alan Macro for Councillor Cotton, Councillor Billy Drummond for Councillor Pattenden. As you said, Chairman, Councillor O'Call is running late, but will be joining us.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any declarations of interest, members? Nope. Thank you. So moving swiftly on, we have a packed agenda this evening, and our first item is a call-in of an executive decision. So I will read my notes as following. This item is for the Scrutiny Committee to review the executive decision of the 19th of March 2026 concerning a response to a motion presented to Council on the 16th of October 2025 on decisions made following public consultation. The call-in was made by Councillors Ross McKinnon, Dominic Bowick, Paul Dick, Paul Kander and Richard Sumner. The way I would like to conduct this, members, is to invite the relevant portfolio holder to speak for up to 5 minutes, and then for the call-in members to speak. I'm happy to give the lead call-in member 5 minutes to speak, should they so wish, and also other members who made that call-in may also speak for up to 3 minutes each, if they so wish. Then there will be an opportunity for the portfolio holder to respond, and then we will open it up to questions and discussion amongst the scrutiny members. In addition, for the benefit of Councillor Pemberton, when we come to the call-in item, we'll allow the portfolio holder to speak, then the call-in, then the portfolio holder to respond, and then I'll bring you in as ward councillor if that's okay. And then we'll again open it up for more general discussion. So I hope that meets with everybody's agreement, and that sounds like a sensible way forwards. So I'd like to now hand over to Councillor Brooks to speak on this, please.
I don't think I need 5 minutes, Chair. And the Scrutiny Committee will make the decision it wishes to on this called-in item. We were, when it came to executive, satisfied that we'd actually added to the information we provide on our website as a register of consultations, and that is outlined in 3.3, which refers to 5.6 of the executive report. It talks about how we are saying quite clearly there, did we proceed with that consultation modified or proceed unmodified? Did we not proceed? Was there no decision required, or was the decision pending? So that actually added to the wealth of information that is provided and is available and can be found on the website. Something new. And in fact, in many respects, that was responding to the motion. The call-in is now talking about whether that provides clear information which decisions have been made contrary to the option preferred by public consultation. But members will know that consultation is not a simple yes, do you like it, or no, do you not like it. It is often much more nuanced than that in terms of comments within the yes, I think this works, but, or no, I don't think it works, but. And a simple black and white, people didn't want this or people did want this, is not always and quite rarely able to be put in such clear terms. So by giving the information of the consultation responses, which is clearly in the public domain, that comes forward all the time, those consultation responses. What will be clear? Did we proceed modified? Did the executive proceed unmodified? That will be clear, and we'll have added a register that is on the website and frankly should have been there before. And frankly, could have been done years and years and years ago, because when I wanted to look back and see how many consultations and the response to those consultations over years, I was not easily able to find that data, that information. This will enable a log and register to grow year on year on year of how this council responds to consultations. However, having said all of that, the Scrutiny Committee will make a decision on this call-in, and executive will find out what that is in the fullness of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Brooks. Councillor McKinnon, would you like to address this now? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Brooks for his comments. The motion was a simple idea to improve transparency to residents. Where residents have responded in great numbers or not so great numbers on one side or another of a question, and the council, the executive, decides to go against them. I don't want to say ignore them, that would be unfair. But when the executive makes a decision which is in contravention of the majority decision of residents who responded to that consultation, I want the council to let those residents know. And I would like the council to let those residents know why. And there may be perfectly good reasons as to why the council has made that decision. And that's for the residents to decide. And it's for opposition, the administration members to decide as well, and we can have a debate about it at the time. But all this motion does is provide clear information in a way that's much clearer than it is at the moment, to say, you said this, we've not done this, and here's why. And we can defend that position or not defend that position as we see fit. The reason we've called this in is because the response to the motion, and it was a fairly detailed report, and Councillor Brooks is correct that the report provides, or the report proposes, additional information which was not available before, but it doesn't address the motion. So the report says that we can put some information on the consultation hub that says we've decided to proceed with modifications following consultation feedback. We've decided to proceed with no modifications. We've decided not to proceed. We've yet to determine it, no decision required, and so on. None of those things address the point of the motion, which is we've decided X after you said don't do X. So yes, that information is to be welcomed. But why can we not have a nice, simple statement and an explanation, it might be a paragraph or two, on the consultation hub, on a different part of the council's website, to say to residents, we've listened to you, we've carefully considered what you've said, but we've gone a different way, and here's why. And we can stand or fall on that. That wasn't addressed in the report, which is why we called this in. Now, Councillor Brooks said that consultations are sometimes nuanced, and that's true. Sometimes they're not so nuanced. And I bring these up purely as recent examples, but the consultation on pedestrianisation, where we now know that over 3/4 of residents said, no, we don't want it. There's no nuance there. The administration should be explaining why they're going ahead with the trial or not going ahead with the trial or whatever. But I use that as an example, not to make points at this meeting. The same with the green bins. Residents responded in the majority that they wouldn't be able to cope, and yet the administration went through with it. Explain why. Councillor Gurley's done a great job of explaining why this is in his opinion, in his administration's opinion, that it's the best move for recycling and so on. That's fine, and we can have a debate about that. But let's say to the residents, you said X, we did Y, and here's why we did it. It won't cost a lot of money. The report that was produced at the executive meeting talked about, oh, well, it would be duplication of information. Oh, so what? Are you telling me that bits of information only appear on one part of the council's website? It doesn't really matter, does it, if information is duplicated elsewhere? The provision of a bit on a web page with a statement or some paragraphs saying to residents, you said this, we've not done it, here's why, wouldn't cost a bean. And duplication, well, who cares? And that, I think, was the disappointing thing. So I think that residents deserve transparency from the council. And I think this motion went some way to improving it. And I hope that the Scrutiny Committee can consider my remarks in that context.
Thank you very much, Councillor McKinnon.
Chairman, would you kindly allow me to 1 minute just to respond to a couple of small points?
I'm going to allow the other members that did the call in to speak first, and then you can come back after that, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Sumner and Councillor Kander, would either of you like to speak on this? Councillor Sumner, 3 minutes.
Chair. There isn't a lot I can add to Councillor McKinnon's statement there. What I would say is that we hear again about history, and that's all very well and good. We could have called for change collectively as a council in history. Some of these things probably set in history before the current set of members were elected in. I don't think it's a valid reason, and I think it's a reason that actually, frankly, should be avoided. I know it's political, I get that, but actually I don't believe what we're talking about here is a purely political point. I think this is a point for the benefit of residents. And in retrospect, could it have been brought in earlier? Yeah, quite probably. Different circumstances, different mindsets, different thoughts, different people. You know, we could have seen it in 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, who knows? The only other thing I would say is that with regards to the provision of a statement as is being requested, if it was positive news, there'd be a public press release. Well, what's the difference? When a paper comes forward, there's a summary and a positional statement and an executive summary explaining the situation. Well, what's the difference? That is information that goes out to the public, but not all public tune into the meetings. We know this, they don't all come, they don't all tune in. Doesn't mean they should be excluded from knowing the information in a sensible, summarised position that anybody can look back on at any given point. So I think we stand by what's been said for the reasons already mentioned, and I would add those to it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sumner. Councillor Kander, would you like to say something?
Just quickly, it's, you know, we're either servants of the people or we're not. And if we are, we shouldn't be ashamed to be able to state on what basis our decisions have been made. As my colleague has said, if it were in the administration's favour and they wanted to tell the public about it, there would be a press release. The public need to be able to trust us, and the only way they can trust us is by us being very clear. Decisions being made because of X, Y, and Z, and it's as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kander. Councillor Brooks, would you like to respond to the call-in members?
Well, just briefly, and I thank them for their comments. I'm going to have to say, as has been said before up and down the country, a consultation is not a referendum. It is out there without a yes or no that says, shall we do this? Oh, you voted against, so we won't do it. or shall we do it? And you voted for. It's not a referendum on an item. It isn't. It is to gather information on what could be better within the policy or action we're looking to take. What are the issues that you foresee? And so it's being painted, I think, a little bit as the public voted against, and you need to tell them why you ignore that. All consultation responses are published, all of them, within reports. A register now exists of the decisions made and why. I think we've really gone very far towards what the motion is looking for. As I say, it would be for the Scrutiny Committee to say, would you add a paragraph or something that says, you know, if that's all Councillor McKinnon is saying, I'm not saying yes and I'm not saying no. It seems an awful lot of effort for stuff that is actually out there in the public domain. Now, he did make a slip up, I have to say, when he said, when we consulted on green bins, he said green bins. He meant black bins and the 3 weekly. He said green bins, which gives me the opening to say when the Conservatives brought in the green bin charge, they went out and consulted and 90% of the public said, don't do it. And they still did it and never properly explained why. So anyway, we are a few angels dancing on the head of a pin here. Frankly, all the data, all the information and a register has been added. Councillor McKinnon is asking for a statement. If the Scrutiny Committee wants to support that, the Executive will consider it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooks. I will now open this up to questions and comments from members of Scrutiny. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's good conversation, and I think it's an important one to bring forward. I do hear that the leader, you know, the register coming forward. I think that's really important. We've also got to remember that people are becoming more tech savvy. I think many of us have grown up with some level of computer training and various other bits and pieces, so we can find all this information online. How you analyse that and want to cut it and compare it and various other things, that really should be down to you, I think, as a resident. I think there is a nuance in consultation. Once you get that ability to write text in, I think there is nuance in that. There is many ways to, you know, read those responses. We live in a very complex world, I think. You know, life really isn't black and white. There's so many different great shades of grey. And as far as transparency goes, I think councils are transparent. We have to be. We're told by Westminster we have to be. You know, there are, not only do we publish everything, and we do it in a very formal written manner, which is signed off often by the monitoring officer. There is also, you know, legislation and statutory obligation, freedom of information, subject matter requests, all those ways. There isn't full standardisation on how data should be represented, but I think to actually duplicate data, having worked in the world of IT, is not a good thing. It really isn't a good thing. That causes confusion. It's very much down to, you know, the question that's going to be asked. And if you put duplication of data down, that can often send someone down a blind alley and not to ask much broader questions and step back, I find. We do have now available publicly AI. It's brilliant, absolutely fantastic. You can put any question in there and it loves things like legislation, formal reports that councils produce or government produces, because it understands it and it's learnt about it. So you can give it any question at all in there and it will work it out for you. Obviously, you need to double check it. It always puts that little thing, by the way, this is an AI answer, please check it yourself. But usually it's correct. And so I think actually this council sounds like it's going on the right path. Data and information and what's available is always going to be changing. You know, we've had legislation come along not that long ago, 8 years ago, I suppose, maybe longer, GDPR, for example, where, you know, people had the right to be forgotten and various other bits and pieces. It's always going to be changing because of the world that we live in and the worry that people have from big corporations that may use that information out extraterritorially, and also the right to have that democratic view of how decisions are made based on what information as well. So I think as long as we publish that information, we publish it truthfully, we allow that register so it can be referenced, either through a simple web search or through AI or just looking it up under a particular department head or through a committee, it should be sufficient. To say it's free, nothing's free in this world. It all takes hours and time and double checking, and any mistake can lead someone off to a false decision or think that there's something underhand going. Well, actually, it's just a genuine mistake. So I think as long as we do genuine transparency, which I believe we do this slow incremental change and improvement on how we do that transparency, making sure that we're well ahead of the minimum statutory regulations, I think we're probably doing the right thing as a council. No, that's just my view.
Thank you. Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with most of the points Councillor Rees said and Councillor Jeff Brooks as well. And not to be sounding, again, repetitive, I just have to say, I've read through this pack and then appendices, and I don't seem to be, it's my understanding, like, I don't see why this was initiated, because as Councillor Brooks said, we do publish all the information, and the information is available to the public. By adding a mere paragraph or a summary, it could help, I agree, but it could be also open to interpretation, like, for some people or most of the people, that paragraph may be sufficient. For some of the people, that may not be. And then it will be repeat after, can you explain that paragraph, please? But that is the question in my mind, like, where do we stop? Because there's information is all there in the domain. And by putting this one, it should not be construed as like, we are not for transparency. And that is the thing I think I'm kind of feeling that from Councillor McKinnon's point is that transparency is not there. It's the opposite. The transparency is there. It's the full information is there, and how people take it and respond and interpret, it's for them. Because with the load of information, people interpret that in a different ways. By summarizing, yes, there would be an abstract summary on all those ones. That is good, but that is really needed? Are we going to say by not having that summary, there is no transparency? And if that's the case, I think I would say we need to provide that, but I don't see that it's happening here. It's the other way around. It's like all the information is there and someone just ignores that information and then puts them as summary, and you call that as full transparency? No, I don't think so. But yeah, I need to hear from other members as well, but that's my point. And Councillor Reid is correct. It's like people use that information and then the free text, and people come up with loads of ideas, and you need to be responding to all those ideas. It's not that yes or no question, as Councillor Brooks said. It's not a referendum like for example, Brexit referendum. People choose to say yes or no, and we can understand what the government has implemented. But it's like the more nuanced. People want some changes, some improvements, and yeah, we should explain, but yeah, that's all there already. So I'm not sure what we are missing. That's the point here. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, some decisions and consultations are comparatively simple, but some are quite complex. And I'm thinking in particular of the consultations taken out on the local plan review just a couple of years ago, when you had a large number of housing sites, for example, a large number of policies, a large number of which attracted a lot of comments and a lot of objections. It would take a significant amount of work to pull all that together in a response to say why you were still going ahead with the local plan review. But I think the resulting document would be so complicated, I don't actually think it would be much use to people. So I think what the executive are proposing to do is probably more than sufficient, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Councillor Sumner?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to use one of Councillor Brooks' positions back on him. The fact that we've had to have an explanation twice already this evening on the difference between a consultation and a referendum kind of says it all, doesn't it? What the majority of residents understand about council business, because they're not involved with it all the time, is not what the people in this room will understand. And I'd go as far to say the people on this side of the room understand far less than the people on that side of the room, because they're doing it as a living. They're in the middle of it all the time. To have all the data out there is all well and good. I dare say, if we look back, we'll probably find that the consultation data for the green bins was all out there, but we're hearing tonight that that wasn't sufficient. FOIs, yeah, absolutely. Residents can put in an FOI, and that comes at a cost to the council in resource, if nothing else. You know, I'm in my work life involved in responding to FOIs, and to have to suddenly reprioritise your working day because one's come in and it needs to be answered straight away is not great for your planning. Duplication of the data duplication of data and the use of AI. Yeah, I don't disagree. You know, the world is moving forward, but not everybody's moving forward at the same pace. And I think the issue with that is inclusivity, or rather the lack of it. We're making an assumption that everybody will be able to deal with it. When suggestions and conversation took place a few years ago about removing the facility for cash payments in car parks, it was all about inclusivity. It was all about, well, not everybody is able to do that. Not everybody's got a phone that's got an app. Not everybody wants to do it on a card. You've got to be able to provide cash. You can't have it always, all the time. If we're going to be inclusive to our residents, let's be inclusive to our residents. Let's think about the people that, yeah, we've got professors out there. We've got people that, with all due respect, at the other end of the scale out there, and they need something simple. The same way that the finance industry had to put plain language in their explanations of financial situations so that everybody had an understanding of it. Why should we be any different?
Councillor McKinnon?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. That's lovely. Councillor Brooks said that consultation is not a referendum. I agree. I think when an administration, and I think his administration had this in their manifesto, I think ours might have it in our manifesto next year, saying that we want local residents to have a say in the decisions that affect them and to feel that they have a say. I'm not saying consultation should be binding. That's why you're able to take a decision in another direction. What I'm saying is, let's just tell the residents why we've done so. He's quite right. I did slip up. I mentioned green bins and not black bins. The green bin, the garden waste charge predates my time, but he did seem to indicate that he would have liked the then Conservative administration to explain themselves as to why they were doing it. Well, that seems to support exactly what we're asking here. If an administration were to go against a consultation response, which I'll take his word for it, that was the case back then, they should explain themselves. I think I know what the reasoning would be. We really need the money. And residents can make a decision on that. They can decide whether they agree or disagree, and they can make their own opinion. But this is exactly what we're talking about. Like Councillor Sumner, it seems that he's kind of secretly in support of this. The Councillor Reid is quite right. There are many questions in some consultations. Some are nuanced, some are not. Sometimes they're simply gathering views. And sometimes, like Councillor Macro mentioned about the local plan, they're actually very complex. That is not what this motion is about. In some cases, and some very high-profile recent cases, they are asking residents for an opinion on a decision. And that's where this motion kicks in. Maybe this motion wouldn't apply to all consultations because of that complexity. That's fine. But it would apply to some. Why not? Well, why should we let the perfect be the enemy of the good? Why not say to residents, when we have those decisions, which we've asked them for their opinion on, here's why we've gone against you. It would not take hours of time to write a statement on the website. The administration and our administration in the past were quite happy to publish press statements, bigging up their own policies, and they would cost a lot more officer time than this. Councillor Armitage, I think I'm hearing from him that the information's already published. It's out there somewhere. Well, maybe, but it's not easy to find. He says that the information is findable. You might have to follow a few links and you might have to click here and click there and know your way around the website. If they really want to find it, the information's there for residents. But that's not transparency. That's deliberate opacity. You're making it harder than it needs to be, not deliberately hard, but harder than it needs to be to make that information discoverable. Why not make it easier to find? What do we lose by doing so? Why would some members of the committee, I don't know, want to keep it that little bit more difficult? I just can't understand it.
Okay. Any further comments? Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to add one point on that, like the word inclusivity was mentioned by Councillor Somna. I'm trying to, again, understand this from a context of, we have this information, and I'm not disagreeing that we should provide that in a manner which public will understand. I'm not disagreeing at all. I'm not saying that we should hide it somewhere in a corner of the website, but that's not it's talking about, Councillor McKinnon. What you're saying is we should be, and I'm looking at page legal mention in page 9, this meets the in accordance, this is accordance with the Local Authorities Act and Government Bodies Act and openness of regulations. So what we are saying is officers are telling us this is exactly meeting all the regulations, but we as politicians sitting in the Scrutiny Commission telling them that no, we don't find it good. We believe what we believe is the correct way to present to the public. And that is kind of like seems to be bothering to me, because we can decide, we can change our minds and say like tomorrow, this is not sufficient. It could be open for interpretation. We need to abide by the regulations. And I'm convinced that whatever information is there is meeting that regulations. Yes, we need to be more open. It is a gradual change, like more openness is always there. And inclusivity is needed here or any decisions. But I'm not able to still understand by doing this in a paragraph and abstract, will all the problems or I wouldn't call it a problems, but I would call it like, yes, information missing would be addressed here? No, I don't think so, because the paragraph wouldn't be sufficient. That is my argument here. The argument of hiding or lack of transparency, it all being brought up here, which it's really bothering me. And I think public listening should understand that we are discussing more of a nuance here, not about transparency or lack of transparency, not about inclusivity or lack of inclusivity. That is kind of, that's what we need to stress here. And I think I can see that is the more the discussion we are having, it's becoming more I would say like on the extreme end. So yeah, I can't remember.
Councillor Kander.
I guess just a couple of things. So the fact that it might meet the legislation doesn't actually mean it's the best it could be or the most open it could be, because legislation is by nature of its fact, it's it's the medium, right? It's not the best. It can never be the best, because otherwise no one would be able to adhere to it. Secondly, if the information is out there and if we have all these wonderful tools that are available that we expect our constituents to be able to use, some of which may not have computers, may not be as computer literate as some of us as Gen Xers, maybe boomers, etc. Why don't we do that for them? Because if it's so easy, we can just put it into an AI summary. We can take the decision meeting that happened where the statements were made as to why the decision was made in contravention of what the actual consultation stated and publish it. One paragraph. If it's that easy for people to find it, then we should find it for them. We shouldn't have to get them to go and get it for them. That's it.
Thank you very much indeed. I think everyone who wants to speak on this has spoken. So we have the opportunity basically to take a proposer and seconder to either let the decision stand as per the executive's decision, in which case this would be implemented immediately, or to state our views on the matter and refer the decision back to executive. Can I suggest, in the interest of fairness, that the call-in members articulate what they would like our advice to the executive to be, and we'll take a vote on that. And if that fails, we'll take a vote on whether to accept that the executive decision should stand. Are members happy with that approach? So Councillor McKinnon, as the lead call-in member, do you want to articulate what it is you would like the committee to consider voting on?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would. I would like to propose that the committee refers this matter back to the executive for reconsideration in light of the comments made by scrutiny members this evening.
And in particular, to have an additional paragraph about issues that are rejected.
Well, I think that's what the motion
Yeah.
is. So
Okay.
they reconsider their rejection of the motion
Okay.
in light of the comments that have been made by some, but not all members.
Great. Do we have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Sumner. Right. All those in favour? 3. Only members of the committee can vote. Sorry, Councillor Candace. That's 3. All those against? 4. Okay. Abstentions? Okay, so that fails, unfortunately. So do I have a proposer for us to advise that the executive should proceed? Yep. Councillor Macro, seconder, Councillor Reid. All those in favour of that? Yep, 4. All those against? 3. Abstentions? Okay, so that carries. So the advice is that we don't have anything additional to say to executive and that their decision should stand. Thank you very much indeed. Right, so moving on, item 3B, call-in of individual decision regarding parking review amendment order number 37 for Lower Way in Thatcham. This item is for the Scrutiny Committee to review the individual decision of the 27th of March 2026 concerning the aspect of the decision relating to Lower Way in Thatcham. The call-in was made by councillors Owen Jeffrey, Tony Vickers, Jeremy Cottam, Martin Colston and Stephanie Stevenson. And I'd like to invite Councillor Gawley to address us on this first, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, thank you to members for calling it in. I think it makes for a good decision-making process, you know, for topics that are important to residents. I suppose in summary, this is for a section of double yellow lines that are in place on Lower Way in Thatcham. And the initial proposal, the initial proposal was to make those lines permanent. They were put in place during COVID, but didn't have the necessary regulation. They were done under emergency legislation at the time. So this was effectively to put the proper and correct legislation in place. Through that consultation process, new information came to light, and new feedback from residents came back to light, and changed that proposal to omit that from the plan to implement, and therefore meaning those lines would be removed. Since then, I believe members were lobbied by various different parties, both for and against that particular decision. So it was just, you know, members obviously took their legitimate right to call that in, and we are here tonight to discuss that. And I think it's good democracy and good to see in action. So I don't really have much else to add, other than it was so finely balanced that my decision at the time was based off of the officer recommendation to actually remove them, because there were mitigations already in place, and that seemed like a sensible way forward on a controversial issue. So I'm looking forward to hearing what the Scrutiny Commission has to say this evening.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Gawley. I'd now like to invite the call-in members to represent their case to us. Who would like to speak on this? Councillor Jeffrey, over to you. Maximum of 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. The particular issue that caused me to initiate the call-in process was that on the Thursday, as this was due to become final at 5 o'clock on the Friday, a member of the public that lives there sent an email to many members. I'm not quite sure how many, maybe it was just the Thatcher members, urging that a call-in should take place so that there could be a reconsideration of the decision that Councillor Gawley has already outlined to you. I don't have strong feelings. I have very few feelings about whether or not there should or should not be yellow lines on this section of Lower Way. When the document came out, I reviewed it for the ward that I represent. I did not look at the other wards in Thatcham or indeed other wards elsewhere. And I had not formed any particular view. However, on the Thursday, when the email came to me, there was literally 1 day left in order to successfully have a call-in so that you within Scrutiny could review the situation and move towards a decision one way or the other. And the only opportunity for that to take place was that there should be a call-in. That is why I started the call-in process. That single opportunity, I am very relieved that other councillors agreed that that was worth doing, and that is why we are here tonight. And I think that any point of view that is brought forward needs to be seriously considered, but that at the end of the day, it is something that has got to be considered and a final decision made. And that is in your hands, Madam Chairman, and your committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jeffreys. Would any other members who submitted the call-in like to speak? Okay. Right. Councillor Gawley, would you like to say anything else before we open it up for general discussion?
I think the only point I would add at this point is that we are really here only to look at Lower Way. I mean, that's really important to remember. The rest of the idea has not been necessarily called in. This is the particular topic that is here. But no, like I said, I'm kind of interested to hear the views of members. You know, I know members already have an opportunity to comment on individual decisions when they're circulated. But yeah, happy to listen and hear the recommendations from Scrutiny.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton, would you like to speak now? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair, and thank you also for allowing me to speak at your committee this evening. Like the other members that have spoken, I don't have any strong views myself. There's a theme emerging here, and I think, to be fair, that is reflective of the comments which came back from residents during the consultation period on this bit of the ID, which were pretty much evenly balanced. I haven't got the numbers in front of me right now, but it was near on 50-50 in terms of whether or not those double yellow lines should remain. This stretch of road is one which myself and Councillor Brooks as well, as my fellow ward member, is one which we frequently receive complaints from residents about in terms of speeding. Occasionally we hear reports of vehicles racing each other from the stretch of road by the Moors roundabout along to where it chicanes around by Painsdown Drive. Speeding is a well-known issue at this particular spot because the road itself between those two spots is pretty straight. There is an added risk as well in that over the last year, 18 months, we've had the development of the Lambourne Meadows estate to the south of Lower Way, which has effectively introduced another access point for vehicles to enter and exit that site, and another potential hinge point for vehicles collisions, issues, safety matters, if and when something should go wrong. I think the rationale of the officers in terms of taking, I don't want to put words in the officer's mouth, of course. I think part of the rationale for potentially removing the double yellow lines was to possibly introduce an element of traffic control and speeding control, because vehicles, particularly travelling west towards Newbury, would in theory have to navigate around parked vehicles, and that would in theory help bring the average speed of traffic down. This is a stretch of road which Councillor Brooks and I have lobbied for years to introduce speeding measures, and it's a conversation that we continue to have with officers to this day about what can be done to kind of help address some of those matters. If you were to try and pin me down on a preference, I would probably say that I don't have any issue with the double yellow lines remaining. I don't necessarily think we should be using parked vehicles as traffic and speeding control. Again, without sort of speaking for the residents on that stretch of road, I don't think there's a massive demand for street parking. The bulk of those properties on the south side of Lower Way have got off-street parking. And I would add that they've got substantial off-street parking as well, certainly to accommodate residents' vehicles, and I dare say possibly also to accommodate visitors as well.
Could you draw your comments to a close? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of what's being proposed from the call-in, I would support the call-in the sense that, you know, it probably makes sense for those double yellow lines to remain permanent. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Members of Scrutiny, over to you for questions, comments. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, it's lovely to actually been asked these points to debate in Scrutiny. Me personally, I haven't been a cyclist for some time, not since COVID. I think since traffic has reappeared on roads, it's become a little bit concerning for me with traffic speeding past. It was good to see the legislation where traffic has to avoid cyclists by 1.5 metres. Of course, that makes it difficult if there is parked vehicles on the side of the road, because a car can't pass you at all if you're already down the middle of the road, the white line. There will be no 1.5 metres, so they'll just try and squeeze past. And if you've got someone slow, like myself on a cycle, the last thing they want to do is follow a cyclist who's going about 8 miles an hour down a 30-mile or 40-mile-an-hour zone. So I think, considering that is a major through road, I've driven down it several times or walked down it several times myself. I think the flow of traffic, it is necessary to keep the flow of traffic. I think we do need to keep cyclists safe, which I think means keep them safely to the side of the road. Don't want to see them cycling on pavements, etc. So my personal view would be keep the double yellow lines. It gives cyclists a chance to stay close to the pavement and allows drivers to be able to overtake safely, give that 1.5 metres or more, without being hurried or taking any risks while doing that overtaking manoeuvre. So that's my view. I think I'm quite in favour in keeping the double yellow lines.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers, I can see your hand, but you didn't take the opportunity to speak as a call-in member, so I will take questions and comments from members of Scrutiny and then come back to you, if I may. Who had indicated? Sorry, Councillor Macro.
Thank you. I noticed that one of the reasons for the objectors who wanted the didn't want the lines to remain was that they said safety has worsened rather than improved since the introduction of the yellow lines, and traffic speeds have increased. But when I look at the officer comments, that doesn't seem to have been addressed. So I wondered if there was any information as to whether traffic speeds have increased or whether there's been any difference to accident statistics.
Is that something that officers are able to comment on?
So Good evening. I don't believe that we've seen an increase in speeds or decrease in speeds because of the result of the double yellow lines, or an increase in accidents. If I could also say that there are dedicated cycle facilities on Lower Way. So for the people who are less confident cyclists, there are off carriageway facilities for them to use. There's a brand new Toucan crossing that's been formed just to the west of Gleeblands as part of the new residential development. And for those competent cyclists who will be on carriageway, this will be the same as for the rest of Lower Way. I must also say that on Lower Way, there are no other double yellow lines along the whole length of Lower Way. It is just over this short section that's in question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you. It's quite unusual for a call-in to be led by a member who says that he has no strong feelings in the matter at all. In fact, he said very few feelings. It's quite interesting. But it was interesting that he was led by residents in leading the call-in. And I think being led by residents is something that we could have perhaps thought about in the previous item. Councillor Gurley mentioned that his decision was finely balanced and it was officers' recommendations which swayed him one way rather than the other. And I'm very glad to hear that. Councillor Armitage very much relied on the fact that officers' input into the reports said various things in voting against my motion earlier on. And again, I don't mean to harp back to it, I am coming to a point, but the previous item was very much a matter of subjective judgment. So I'd find it very surprising if he were to vote against officer recommendations here on a technical matter relating directly to highways officers' expertise. Councillor Pemberton mentions that he's seen in this roads speeding, racing, antisocial behaviour. Well, I've got news for him. Happens in my ward, probably happens in every ward of every member in this council. That's a police matter. We as ward members can play our part in bringing those issues to Thames Valley Police's attention, but it's not really in the remit of this council to directly address those. I don't think that our highways officers, and I think we've got very good highways officers in West Berkshire, should be ignored or their advice set aside when we're dealing with a technical matter directly related to their expertise. And I think I would encourage other members of the Scrutiny Committee to follow that principle.
Thank you very much. Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. I was not going to speak, but since Councillor McKinnon took my name, it's like, for one point, I agree with him. It's like, it's unusual for Scrutiny Committee to look into a technical matter by officers after it's gone through a consultation, because it would have gone through all the consultation. I was going to ask the officers one question, nevertheless, from that one. If we have had consultations and we had responses to these consultations, did we had or missed an opportunity from the residents who had issues with that, or is it a deadline issue? I understand Councillor Jeffrey mentioned about the last date, and so what has happened here? Like, have we had enough chances to address those concerns by the objectors? That is where I want to understand, because I don't want to go into that technical overturn the technical wisdom of the officers. So yeah, just to go.
Over to the officer.
So everyone had the opportunity to offer their opinion during the consultation stage. I think there were 7 objections, 10 supporting representations, and 1 neutral. So we've taken all of those views into consideration to come up with this recommendation. We've followed due process, and I don't think there's anything else to add. We've followed the process correctly, and it's just those people that didn't like the decision requested it to be called in.
I'm going to finish taking questions and comments from members of Scrutiny before I come in. I think Councillor Gawley, did you indicate? So I'll come back to you in a moment, if I may. Councillor Matharaj.
I'm sorry to, like, just a supplementary, like, for all the objectors, particularly who want this decision to be overturned, is there an opportunity to go back again? Because it's fair to expect fairly important decision to be fully satisfied. We can't satisfy 100% of the residents, but I'm just asking again, requesting through you, Chairman, is like, is there an opportunity to go back to them and maybe clarify, or any misunderstandings? Is there any technical misunderstandings? So just make sure that that fairness is there to that residents who object to.
I don't think there was any misinterpretation of the responses. They were all very clear.
Thank you. Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, I mean, 21 isn't a massive response on a consultation. That could be because it only affects a very close network of people. It could be because of the dates and people were otherwise engaged, as I think was suggested by Councillor Jeffrey. Yeah, I mean, if you finely balanced is the word, Councillor Gurley, I don't envy you at all, having had to make that decision based on the fact that it was 11 on one direction and 10 on the other. And 4 of them that objected didn't actually give any support in detail, according to the information that we have in front of us. It's interesting to pick up on the fact that there is provision for cyclists, because I think that the Scrutiny Committee were all contacted by Mr. Stokes, I think it was, that was representing cyclists and concerned about the safety element along there. I mean, I have to be honest, I haven't driven along that road for quite a while, because I always end up coming in from the other direction. But speed is an interesting aspect to it, because I think quite often speed management involves parked cars. I think the element of having an obstruction in the road quite often is a controller for speed, in which case you wouldn't want the lines there. I don't know that there's going to be, none of us know whether there's going to be a difference if it was to go out to consultation again. It is a finely balanced one. I think having safety for all users of the highway is absolutely paramount. If we've got something for cyclists which doesn't put pedestrians at risk, then fantastic. I'm always concerned, as somebody that lives right on the border and works over the border, the amount of cycle lanes that are combined pavements in Reading it horrifies me. And I've on many occasions closed an eye or two as I've looked out of the office window and seen people trying to walk along the pavement as people are going on their bikes at probably 20, 30 miles an hour. It does worry me. We don't want to be drumming up our own business and A&E, frankly, for reasons like that. But so it depends on the provision that's there. And I think maybe that if this was to be reviewed, then the portfolio holder would probably look to that as being something that he needs to be satisfied himself before approaching the decision again.
Right, thank you. Any members who haven't spoken yet? No. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Vickers and then to Councillor Gawley.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. No, I just, because when I was looking at the papers, I couldn't find a plan, and I just asked Stephen Chard if he could make sure the plan was available so that you've got the full picture. You know, they say a picture speaks 1,000 words, and for those members that weren't familiar with the area, I wondered if you might like to do that before people vote. And just also to say that I'm a member of the Cycle Forum, and I signed the call in because as soon as I realised this was an issue involving a cycle lane, I thought, well, yes, it should have a real proper scrutiny. And, you know, it looks a finely balanced decision. I'm really pleased there's something here, which I think if you did go against the officer's recommendation, I don't believe that would be overturned. And I think, you know, it's basically doing your job.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vickers. That is now on the screen for members to see.
And I think there's a Toucan crossing somewhere. I don't actually personally ride this route very often. I have done so, and I always stick to a cycle lane when there's one provided. And in my ward, on this same traffic regulation order, Andover Road, the A343, where we'd spent £100,000 building the actual traffic lane on road. It was very pleasing to see that finally we are getting the double yellow lines. But, you know, this is my ward, not my ward rather, and I think the ward members' view should be taken into account as well as the residents.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Gawley.
Yeah, thank you to everyone for the kind of commentary this evening. It's been interesting, and it is a difficult one. I mean, I am a cyclist and a very keen one, and spend far too much, if you speak to my bar, far too much time cycling, to be quite frank. And I think the point I would highlight here is it's the responsibility of every road user to look out for every other road user as well. You know, no amount of double yellow lines or no double yellow lines is ever going to stop close passes happening. Absolutely not. Driver education and good enforcement is the key, and mutual respect for one another as human beings, not cyclists or cars. And I think that's a key element to take away. And I think on this one, it was, like I said, finely balanced. And I suppose what I would say is from experience in my own ward, speeding issues are quite rightly, as Councillor McKinnon pointed out, antisocial behaviour issues. And I'm fairly confident that if any other variation of traffic calming measures were put down that road, there'd be another batch of complaints for a different reason. My ward is Clay Hill. We've got Turnpike Road and Kiln Road that have got the speed cushions there. And the number of complaints I get from residents because of the noise they make versus the impact on reducing speeding is phenomenal. So it's a case of lesser of all of the evils, isn't it, I think, when it comes to this. And that's why I think, in my opinion, you know, the officer recommendation was key. And I think whatever we do there, we're going to disappoint somebody. But I go back to my substantive point, which is around mutual respect on the road and looking out for each other, quite frankly. But interesting to hear the recommendations from Scrutiny, and we'll certainly bear that in mind as it makes its way onto the next part of the decision-making process. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Would members who submitted the call-in like to articulate something that we can vote on, please? And we'll see if we have a proposer and a seconder thereafter.
Madam Chairman, you slightly nonplussed me there. I think we've heard the comments as to the officers and from Councillor Gawley as to why the recommendation was the way that it was. The concern of the member of the public, I hope I've put across in a way that is understood and was comprehensible. I think by any definition, it is a balanced decision. And I would think that, quite frankly, it is not going to be a major issue. Whichever way you go, it will then be coming back through the executive system in any case for the decision, will it not?
Okay, so the call-in was basically saying to keep the yellow lines. So can I suggest that we have, am I correct in that? Yeah, okay, thank you. Is there a proposer for that recommendation? No. Okay, so there is no motion then. Is there a proposer that we reject this call-in and executive should continue, or the individual decision on behalf of the portfolio holder in this case should stand? Councillor Sumner?
Sorry, Chair, just to take half a step back. Could the proposal not be that the portfolio holder reviews the decision made, and if content with the decision and the safety, as I've mentioned, of all users of the highway along that stretch is assured, then he has the ability to stick with the decision that's been made.
Okay, I'm happy for that to be a proposal. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Reid? Great. All those in favour? Great. Okay. So that will be summarised by Mr Chard and relayed on to Councillor Gawley. Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you, Councillor Gawley, Councillor Pemberton, members who did the call-in and officers as well. That brings us to the end of that item. If any of you would wish to leave at this point, you're very welcome to do so. We don't expect you to sit through the whole of the rest of the meeting, unless, of course, you want to do that. So moving on now. Item 4, playing pitch strategy. I'd like to invite Councillor Foote, April Pebbody, Jude Thomas and Drew McHenry to present this item, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to introduce to the Commission the draft playing pitch strategy, or PPS, which will be presented to Executive for adoption on the 21st of May. I understand that this committee will be focused on the process by which this strategy has been developed, so I'd like to give some background context. The PPS was commissioned in October 2024 to be undertaken by Stuart Todd Associates following the corporate procurement framework to provide an evidence-based strategy to improve the quality and availability of pitches and courts in the district, and in turn offer better accessibility for residents to partake in exercise and active leisure. The sports covered by the PPS are cricket, football, hockey, lacrosse, netball, rugby and tennis. It's important to understand that the PPS process follows a Sport England framework, which includes the requirement for steering group governance throughout, and ultimately the sign-off of the data, assessments reports, the draft and final strategy by the entire steering group before progressing to the next stage. In line with the prescribed framework, the Stage A process for the PPS commenced with the formation of the steering group. This comprised of Stuart Todd Associates, Sport England, the relevant national governing bodies, including the Football Association, the Football Foundation, England Rugby via the RFU, England Hockey, England Netball, the England Cricket Board, Berkshire Cricket, Lawn Tennis Association, West Berkshire Council officers from Leisure, Countryside and Planning. I'll be joining the steering group going forward. To align with the local plan, the strategy provides recommendations up to 2041, and the district is split into the same 3 areas as are listed in the local plan. Stage B commenced with the mass data gathering exercise to fully understand the district. This included meeting with many organisations such as schools, pitch providers and West Berkshire Council members and officers. This stage also included surveying all the clubs and pitch and court providers and users. As part of this process, projected demand to 2041 was also calculated to include known developments, population change and trends, including the substantial rise in women's sport, all of which were once again checked, challenged and signed off by every member of the steering group. Following this, the supply and demand was analysed to produce assessment reports, which is referred to as Stage C, which were then used to inform the strategy, which is Stage D in the process. The draft strategy was considered by Executive Board executive briefing on the 2nd of October 2025, seeking approval to go out to consultation. The public consultation process was undertaken in line with the corporate consultation framework and ran from the 19th of November 2025 to the 4th of January 2026. The consultation feedback supported and reinforced the draft PPS findings, and therefore the PPS remained mostly unchanged. A summary of the public consultation was circulated with the papers for this meeting. Whilst not part of the consultation as the consultation was on the strategy and not the supporting detail, background documents 1 to 3 are now included in the PPS final pack to provide contextual detail. Once the final strategy is approved, the steering group will enter stage E, which involves working together to action the priorities of the strategy. It should be noted that the delivery of the priorities within the strategy is the responsibility of the steering group as a whole and not solely West Berkshire Council. A live delivery plan is being developed currently to be reviewed and actioned by the steering group as a whole. Once complete, the delivery plan will be available for viewing on a West Berkshire Council PPS-specific web page and updated as and when appropriate. The strategy provides recommendations in the form of 3 key points. Number 1, protect. This involves securing long-term use, opening up sites for community sport, and protecting future use. Item 2, to enhance, which includes improvements to pitches, courts, and facilities, such as changing rooms and changing facilities. And item 3, provide, which requires capital projects to create new pitches and new facilities. The strategy has been written to ensure inclusivity and provides recommendations to meet the demands of all. The increase in girls' and women's sport is significant, and the rise in demand is accounted for throughout the strategy. It's worth noting that the sports covered by the playing pitch strategy are either those with a noticeable increase in women's participation, or are unisex sports, or traditionally played by women and girls. The individual recommendations of the PPS can be found in the strategy, supported by background document 1. However, it is understood that these are not for consideration at this particular meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Foote. Over to members of scrutiny for questions and comments. Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I think this report is woeful. It has no mention of budgets, has no real mention of action plans. I look at the budget figures in, I think it's 1.5, and you're proposing 1.3 million for the next 3 years. That won't even barely produce 1 3G pitch. There's no mention of Henniking, the costs of Hennick. There's no mention of the views on the Faraday roadside, and in particular the costs of producing not just the pitch but also a clubhouse, which should actually make it generate income. And generally, there's no business cases produced for any of these items. I just don't know where to go with this, frankly. It's just, in my view, very disappointing.
Responses from officers, from Councillor Foote.
If I may, I'll kick off on that. I think what I would say to that is this is a strategic document. We made the point that the actual delivery of the playing pitch strategy will be carried out by the steering group, and that is in the process of being set up. Bear in mind, councillors, that this strategy stretches for 15 years. So it is difficult to map out the detail of spend at this point. It's a living document that is going to be adapted as we progress. The delivery of the playing pitch strategy is going to be through that steering group, and that is how we will come to implement the rollout of pitches, and that's where costs and such like will be mentioned. And finally, I would say that we did mention that this is going to be updated as we go forward, so there will be further reports to council, and it will be published on the website. I don't know, Chair, if you'd like me to hand over to any of my officers who might want to comment.
If you want to comment on that specific point from Councillor Wollaston, yes.
So looking at the point you made regarding Hennickworthy, I would say that there is no final plan developed for Hennickworthy yet, so therefore costings could not be put in place. I'm referring to the point made about Faraday Road and that there's no mention of supporting infrastructure. That was something that was picked up in the public consultation, and so therefore the final strategy does refer to supporting infrastructure being required for clubs to be able to kind of sustain themselves moving forwards.
That is a general point about clubhouses, though, in the report, isn't it? Not specifically about a clubhouse at Faraday Road.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Pebbody?
Thank you. I suppose the other thing to point out is that it won't be just West Berkshire Council funding pitches, etc. going forward. We would be looking for partnership funding, also grant funding. So it would be very difficult to identify exactly what would be spent at this stage, because obviously we would be looking for those to work with partners and to look for grant funding opportunities. And our partners also look for grant funding opportunities, not just ourselves.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks?
Are you happy for me to say
If it's on
something
that
as
specific
leader?
point, yes. Yeah.
It's interesting, the response, and I was quite frustrated that we couldn't issue a delivery plan with a strategy. As members will know, I'm very keen to do that with all strategies. But this isn't all in our hands. All members will know that there's a steering group which includes Sport England, the FA and other sports bodies with a stake in what we do and where we put pitches. So this council is not independent of action, but equally in bringing those along, and it's sensible to do so, there are grants available from them which pump up the 1.3 million that Councillor Wollaston referred to. So that's a long-winded way of saying we will be looking to come out with a delivery plan of where they go in consultation with those bodies. The Hennickworthy Master Plan, I'm happy to say publicly, needs to be integrated with the North East Thatcham Master Plan, with the Thatcham Community Hub, which has got sports facilities there at the moment. You cannot do that in isolation, and there was the danger that we were doing those three schemes in isolation, and we're now going to join them up. So there's a lot of reasons that probably might have been in, they wouldn't have been in the playing field strategy, but I'm happy to, with Councillor Foote, clarify them, and I hope that's helpful to the committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In section 5.10, it says that there's be placement of 3G football pitches in, I think, 5 different school sites. So I would like to be assured, please, that the public and private, well, not private clubs, but clubs outside of the school, shall I say, will have access to those sites. The other thing is I'm a bit concerned because I know the playing field at Field Green School fairly well. I've walked past it fairly often. And in the autumn term, winter term, it's all laid down to rugby pitches and one football pitch, I think. At the moment, there's a running track and there's a cricket pitch in the middle. And so I'm a bit concerned that if you, with a site like that, if you put a 3G pitch in, it's going to preclude the usage of the site for these other sports. And obviously this is, I'm talking specifically about Field Green. I would imagine, though, that that situation may pertain to other school sites as well.
Would you like to respond to that, Councillor Foote?
Yeah, thanks, through you, Chair. Yes, I think, again, it circles back to the fact that this is a strategy. It's a strategic document. And do you remember I mentioned about the 3 major priorities? You know, one is to protect. So we protect the pitches that are already in existence. We try and improve those, obviously. The next big point is to enhance. Now, these are pitches that maybe have fallen into some degree of disuse. The facilities are not good, and we can enhance those. And again, the point has been made already about accessing grant funding to help us with that. And there are, as I read out, there are a lot of sporting bodies that are sitting on the steering group that we will be working in collaboration with. So enhance forms a big part of the argument that you've mentioned. And then the final piece is to provide, and we said that we know if this ties in with the local plan, we've got, we've got Sandalford, we've got North East Thatcham, we've got these big developments that are going to come on stream with lots of residents who need access to sport. So we've got to look at where we're going to be providing new pitches. So it's once again, it's a very much a strategy, gives us an idea of direction. It's a living process, so the delivery is going to be via that steering group, which will be meeting and has to meet on a very regular basis to implement the strategy.
Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's interesting to see the expansive list of sports uses that are contained within this. And I recognise within some of the text the different needs that we've got. I think one of the things that I was drawn to is number 6 on page 175 of our pack, with regards to the use of artificial pitch surfaces for sport. And the environmental concerns have been duly noted there. I suppose my question is, we close reading that with containment is the current policy of direction, and new AGPs will be asked for when Sport England is consulted on such proposals. Are we talking about Sport England being consulted on the proposal for AGPs in the widest term, or are you looking at individual applications for individual sites? Because that either one of those, I think, is going to take you off in considerably different directions, potentially different requirements, different costs, different outcomes. Can you just some clarity on that, please?
Councillor Foot.
Yes, Chair, if I may, I will probably ask my colleagues just to give us some detail on that. But just as a general point, you've mentioned Sport England artificial grass pitches. This is an interesting area because clearly there are the considerations of climate change. We're getting to a point where we might get, for example, very, very dry summers, so that when it comes to the start of, for example, the football season, grounds may be too hard. If they're grass in the winter months, they can get very wet and not be played on so much. And the whole benefit of the artificial grass pitches is that you can circumvent that problem. They can be used a lot more, and we can get more of our young people in particular active throughout the district. But on your point about how we bring in Sport England and the sort of national bodies, if I may, I'll defer to Mr. McHenry.
Yes, I think I understand your question to be kind of at what stage is Sport England involved in applying for a new AGP. And obviously throughout the strategy process, as Councillor Foot mentioned, Sport England have been on the steering group. So they have checked and challenged, signed off every single stage of the PPS. So any recommendation that includes an AGP, they will have signed off at this position. Any AGP would also require planning permission, and Sport England are they would reply to any planning permission that is sought. So they would have their comment on that. So not only have they kind of supported if it is within the strategy, we'll continue to work alongside them through stage E, and any time that a development comes forward, we will be conversing with them about that, and then through the planning application, they would comment as well. So it's kind of ongoing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So does that, so for planning applications, then they become a designated consultee for the process?
I believe they may well be a statutory consultee. Am I correct in that?
I believe they are currently.
Yeah.
That may be.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
maybe change.
yeah, there's a possibility that could change, but at the moment we believe they are statutory consultees in that process if you were putting an application in for an artificial grass pitch.
Okay, thank you. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've done the whole blisters at the start of the season thing, and it's never a joy. Doesn't matter what people tell you. So, playing on artificial pitches at that stage of the season is is an absolutely fantastic thing if you can do it. I just think we need to be mindful of the issues that have been raised and the approach there. And again, it comes back to transparency and clarity of who's involved and what direction it's going to take the planning generally. But thank you for your response.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
I have to say, contrary to Councillor Wollaston's comments, I think it's an excellent report. As stated, with multi-party decisions, a strategy, you really do have to make sure that everyone's in the same church, let alone the same singing off the same hymn sheet. And I think this document does it. Things will change. I know that Mr. McHenry engaged early on through the consultation with Dowie Abbey and Richard Morris, who's I believe the chair of the there, and he raised his concerns. Most of the teams that play there don't come from the parish or the ward. They come from quite a long distance away. But there are other topics, I'm sure, that, and it's a nice thing to see, a flexible strategy, that things like paddleboard may come in, courts come, but that we may find actually strategically in a number of years that's a bit of a fad and will have disappeared and everyone starts moving back to tennis again. Also good to see that you're encouraging tennis clubs to take on non-member slots so they can do a pay and play. I think that's really important. I went up to actually Dowie Abbey in the weekend and I was disappointed to see for most of the time 4 of the 6 courts were not being played on. And that was, you know, a Saturday morning, which was a great shame. And so I think encouraging maybe public access, people who want a game of tennis, you know, where's one going to be open this weekend or something, and maybe the council could become a hub for that, for clubs that are opening up to pay and play, where they can just, you can book on there and it works some AI magic and it will say, oh, actually, there's a couple over in Dowie Abbey, and you've got great parking. And after you've had your game, you can, by the way, you can wander across to the pavilion and buy yourself a beer and help contribute to the funds of keeping the pavilion going. No, it's a trust one. So I think, to me, a strategy has to be flexible. I think this provides it. I think those big ticket items of protect, enhance, provide are great. I only wish Westminster allowed councils to be able to buy land more, to have more land available, but we know that actually landowners tend to probably look for more profitable areas to sell that, which is a great shame, but does look to me to be West Berkshire and the other parties involved maximising that capability with the resource and aspirations, hopefully with things like North East Thatcham coming along as well, to increase that capability for people to sport and enjoy lives and have a great community engagement.
Okay, move on to Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Chairman. I take Councillor Foot's point about this being a 15-year strategy and it needs to be updated, but the point about the budget, I think, is a good one from Councillor Wollaston. Of course, this strategy will be dependent on a budget and a delivery plan to implement. But without budgetary details, without details of where the money's going to come from, whether it's going to come from West Berkshire Council funding or Sport England or the Football Foundation or whoever, it's really just a wish list. You know, this strategy is a list of things we would like to do. And that's great, but there's not really much to scrutinise. Would we like more pitches? Do we want to give netball teams and hockey teams places to play? Well, of course we do. I mean, I'd like to build a water park in Lambourne next to Councillor Wollaston's house, but I can't because we don't have the money. We know the council's financial situation. So we've heard it before. We've heard it before over many years, actually. This strategy will be updated to take account of the financial situation, to take account of the funding that we can or can't obtain. So there's not much to scrutinise, really. Yes, it looks great. Yes, we'd like to achieve all these things, but without the money and the delivery plan behind it, I couldn't agree with Councillor Brooks. It'd be nice to see a delivery plan with this. We don't really have it. So as far as bringing it towards this scrutiny committee, would we like to do all of these things? Well, yes, of course we would. I do have a couple of questions actually though for Councillor Foot. Why is lacrosse mentioned as a named sport in the strategy?
Councillor Foot.
Well, we're somewhat unique in West Berkshire because lacrosse is a sport that's played, as you know, at St Bartholomew School, and it's, I think, fair to say that it's a sport that is not common, in fact, very uncommon in state schools. It is played in the UK, but it, tends to be played in private school situations. And at St Bartholomew School, there are teams that they can fill their teams. I believe they have 2 lacrosse teams. They have fixtures. There's the Phoenix Club that is based at St Bart's, and in fact I see them practicing on Saturday mornings because I live in a building right next door to the pitch that they use. So it's a challenge, and as you read in the report, the difficult thing with lacrosse is marking out pitches. They do find it difficult to get a pitch that's marked out specifically for lacrosse. But it's a sport that has a following, and there is a demand, and consequently, it's perfectly reasonable, I feel, to have it in the strategy. Thank you.
I think it's I think it's a fairly niche sport compared to the other sports that are in the strategy. You mentioned the club there. I'm not sure that's very wise. The strategy here mentions one specific club. I won't repeat their name. And it says that the objective of the strategy is to provide that club with a home. We've been here before. I don't think the council should be providing a particular club, any particular club for any sport with a home. If the council wants to provide facilities to support a particular sport, that's fine. There's another question about whether lacrosse or paddle or whatever is really worthy, but should that be considered within the remit of a playing pitch strategy for the council? When you've got one club based in Newbury, and there's a very real possibility that residents in Englefield or Calcott or Lambourne will be asked to fund one club based in Newbury in a very niche sport when they would look at their own situation and find that there's no council money available for core services closer to home. I think it's very, very unwise, and I appreciate your comments, to be naming specific clubs and having a strategy that has an objective to provide that club with a home when there are hundreds of sports clubs in West Berkshire that are not getting that treatment.
Councillor Foot.
Yeah, I think Ms McHenry would like to come in on that, Chair, if that's okay. Thanks.
I think it's probably worth mentioning that the strategy is formed based on evidence, demand, statistics, and the demand arising from lacrosse is from a single club. So therefore the strategy in response can only refer to that single club that is creating the demand. So it's all based on kind of facts and figures. You will note that many other clubs are mentioned throughout the strategy, so they're not singled out. I would also say that throughout the consultation process, many of the responses came from lacrosse. So it kind of supported the fact that their inclusion was worthwhile.
Okay. Councillor Drummond.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to make a comment to Councillor McKinnon. Lacrosse is really popular in the Drummond household. My 2 daughters played it at St Bart's. My daughter was the team captain when they went out to New York. And it's a really great sport, and it's well liked in the area. Anyway, my question is to somebody across the other side. Can you give me an example outlining specific mechanisms and timeline for reviewing progress on the playing pitch strategy delivery plan, and how will the council respond if targets for new and improved pitches are not met?
Thank you. Well, again, I understand that the actual playing pitch delivery plan, the steering group will meet at the Stage E review. I think they meet 3 months, 6 months.
3, 6 or 12.
Yeah, you can either meet at 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. So there is a regular review of the progress of implementing the strategy and the delivery plan. And in fact, if the steering group have not met or there's no progress over a period of 3 years, it lapses. You're obligated to make sure that there is a regular meeting cycle, and if that fails, then you have to go back to a refresh of the playing pitch strategy. In other words, it sort of slips into abeyance, really. So it's absolutely imperative to keep that process going. And as I said in my preamble, there will be a dedicated page on the West Berkshire website so that people can see the progress of the playing pitch strategy, and that will be updated to give members of the public, committee members, a chance to see how we're doing on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. But can I ask? If you get any targets you're trying to achieve, you could let us see.
Yeah, I'll hand you over to Mr. McHenry, if that's okay.
So the PPS does outline there are specific priorities that would need to be met sooner than others. There are priorities that could be met easier than others as well. So there are kind of no cost options, such as opening up facilities for the community. And then throughout that Stage E review, that's when the steering group will come back together. We'd get informed by Sport England, the national governing bodies, of what their priorities from the PPS delivery plan might be and what they, would like to see actioned. And obviously, we would have a steer from our members as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coyle.
I just really wanted to comment that I think that Councillor McKinnon has perhaps been a bit unfair on officers and what they're actually tasked with doing. I mean, as has been said, it is a strategy, and as a strategy, I just think it is really excellent. And one of the things that I think that is important to note as scrutiny is to look at how the strategy at the consultation process and the responses to that. And I think looking at that, there seems to be a very positive response to the strategy, and also that there has been the key issue of providing supporting infrastructure has been taken on board in the amended strategy. And I also think that it's just really important that in terms of funding, as just reflecting what's been said, that this is it's not all West Berkshire funding, but we need to be able to have a blueprint to draw on that draws on both the statistics that we've come up with and the feedback from members and sports clubs as to what we need in order to go out and get that funding. And also there's some really important things in it that are reflected in things like security of tenure, which I think is incredibly important for clubs, not all of which involves necessarily funding, but helps secure funding in the first place. So I think it's really important, and I think it would be a shame to sort of hear it sort of slightly belittle's too strong a word, but I just think it's excellent. I think it is important what Councillor Drummond was saying, and I understand that this comes next, but in terms of timeframes, because I do know in the consultation that there was some frustration expressed by that from consultees about when might we expect things to happen. So, but I hear that that's going to be coming.
Okay. Councillor Foote.
Thank you very much. I think in response to that, for most of today, I was at a conference in Reading hosted by Get Berkshire Active, and there were a lot of participants there, including Football Foundation, Sport England presented, and the basic sort of mood, if you like, in that meeting was collaboration. This is really key, and it's a great opportunity for co-production. We're dealing with clubs, sporting clubs, voluntary clubs, people give up their time, they, you know, voluntarily for this. And there is funding out there. And bodies like Sport England and Football Foundation are really keen to provide grant funding. And what was interesting today was that a key part of that is, where is the community engagement? You know, are we engaging with our clubs and our you know, organisations locally to provide what is wanted locally? And this is the great thing about the strategy as opposed to the delivery, because if you like, the strategy gives you this, the direction of travel. The delivery and the steering group, the delivery steering group will provide the tactical input. And as we've said earlier, if it involves any sort of planning process, then that will go through the normal planning process. You'll have statutory consultees and the public will be able to be involved as well. Yeah, I'll hand over to Ms. Thomas, please.
So just to add to that, exactly, the delivery plan will bring the targets through. But I think a couple of things just to consider. We actually have an officer in post now that is working on the playing pitch strategy. So that's something that we've not had in the past. So that obviously Drew's expertise is showing already. I think with regard to the funding, I think it's important to understand that we will be looking at these on a case-by-case basis, and depending on where they are, what's being delivered, that will depend on what funding is available. So we can't sort of budget against each individual priority at the moment. And then I think the other thing just to really wish to highlight is the fact we've already delivered a number of priorities here. Hennickworthy, the courts there, the courts at Kennet, Cotswold, tennis courts are now a 3G pitch. So whilst we've been developing this, we've also been delivering on some priorities, and you know, we've got some others that we're sort of moving forward with at the moment. So
thank you very much. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to leap to Councillor McKinnon's defence just for a moment, if I may. I think it's well, it's not a surprise, is it, Councillor Reid? No, it's exactly the same you do with your colleagues. I think the leader's already mentioned that his preference would be to see a delivery plan with the strategy. In fact, and with all due respect to those members that are sitting in the room that weren't here over 4 years ago, he often raised the topic with us when a strategy was brought forward. Many times would you have heard a chorus from the administration saying, it's a strategy. He wanted a delivery plan. Times have moved on. Don't believe that requirement has. It's interesting to hear from Ms. Thomas that some of those things have already been delivered. So actually you could have provided us a partial delivery plan. You could actually have put some nice ticks in boxes that said, and we've already done this. So, you know, let's not go, well, Councillor McKinnon's being unfair because he's asking for a delivery plan. Your leader's been doing the same ever since I've known him, which is not as long as some of the others of you have known him, but he's nodding over there, and I'm glad to see that he's in agreement with that point. It's fact. You know, if you have got, and we wanted to, there were many times when we wanted to be able to put a delivery plan, even a partial delivery plan forward. I think it's important to bring the two together wherever you can. And I think all members and all officers should agree on that. Thank you, Chair.
I've got a few questions myself. Beg your pardon, sorry, Ms. Pebbody.
I just wanted to confirm that the delivery plan is very much under creation at the moment, and we're probably about a month away before being able to share that with residents and yourself. So I don't want you to think nothing has happened. It's very much underway. And as we've mentioned, we've already delivered on numerous projects while this strategy is being finalised, and obviously they will be reflected within that delivery plan.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If it's only a month away, will that, I mean, this is going to executive, this strategy on the 21st of May. Would you then anticipate that the delivery plan will also go to executive?
I think if, you know, to give a straight answer, I think that would be, it would be hard for us to say that, yes, it definitely would, Chair. I think we need a little bit of latitude on that front. You know, put my hand up to that. I would say to you and members that it would be unlikely that that would be the case. It's just, we need a little bit more time than that, I think.
It's important that we're aware that the steering group has to be party to this process. So we're not able to just produce it and present it. It will have to go through the governance of the steering group. So that's the bit that will prevent it from going so soon.
Okay.
But we're waiting for it's the approval at executive that will then allow. Drew and I were talking about this today as to how quickly we thought that could go through. So I think you've already speaking to the consultants about it. So, you know, that is in play, but we have to accept that the steering group is the key part to that process.
Okay, so where might stakeholders be able to follow that process then? Is that going to be online? Is it going to be a constantly evolving document?
Yeah. Yes, we will make it available online, and obviously we will be updating it. It'll be a live document that will be regularly updating as the steering group and ourselves deliver on projects.
Okay. So then in theory, if Scrutiny wanted to look at any particular aspect of that, we would be able to do that because we would be able to see that information.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. In the council strategy for 23 to 27, it explicitly says that there would be a community sports stadium at Faraday Road. So Drew McHenry's made the point that the strategy talks about clubhouses in a generic way. But could you comment on what is actually happening with the clubhouse at Faraday Road, bearing in mind we're only a year away from the end of that council strategy? Is there still an intention to deliver on that?
Yes, there is, Chair. Again, there are various moving parts on this, but yes, there are plans afoot to ultimately bring forward, you know, plans for built infrastructure there. Again, you mentioned a community sports facility, and that is key. We've got to plan the infrastructure that is going to be fit for purpose and adequate. So that process is ongoing, but I can assure you it is ongoing. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Regarding the funding, so we've obviously come to the end of the 25-26 financial year, and it says 193,000. Are you able to break down for us what that money was spent on? And are we actually having to hold over some of that money into this financial year?
Sorry, so yes, some of that has been rolled over into this year. We've got, and we have some allocation, which is already detailed. Yeah, that's right, isn't it?
And so, just to say, some of the projects that we have delivered on have been funded by the UK Prosperity Fund, so that wouldn't necessarily been shown within those figures.
Okay. I think it would be quite useful going forward to see where the council funded and the externally funded projects are, so that we can keep an eye on, you know, are there other opportunities that we should be taking to apply for money, so it's not just the council that having to cover the cost of this. I know you've made the point that it's a rolling process, but I know that in the past some members of the public have said that we haven't made enough of football foundation funds that are available, for example.
Maybe, Chair, if I can come back. I mean, I think what we're sort of focusing on is you know, our plans for the artificial grass pitch going in at Faraday Road. And we've made the point in the past that if the council is funding that, then it means that we've got, if you like, a blank sheet of paper to apply for grant funding through the Football Foundation for other parts of the district, for example, out in the east, or areas where we know we're short of over 7 artificial grass pitches throughout the district. So, you know, we can focus on that and apply for grant funding. It's not It's not that we won't be applying for grant funding. It's just that we identified a priority for the use of Faraday Road, as you mentioned, as a really a sporting facility that can be maximally utilised, hence the artificial grass pitch. But it means that it frees us up for looking for grant funding for other pitches elsewhere in the district. If I may, I'll hand over to Drew McHenry.
I think there's sometimes a view that Football Foundation money is just kind of free money and is available on whatever site you request it. And I think it's important to note that there are very kind of stringent parameters around what the Football Foundation will actually fund, and they will fund only with a strategy in place. So the playing pitch strategy is one part of that, and they needed that to be able to fund certain areas. And the local football facility plan, which was undertaken by them kind of in conjunction with our playing pitch strategy middle of last year, is another thing that will contribute to where they know they are able to fund. And they also look for things like match funding. So it's not always the handout that people kind of will see it as, although it is often a very, very substantial help.
And just finally, Chair, if I may, the Football Foundation grant funding also comes back to community involvement. So they like to see demonstrable, local club participation and buy-in to that. They want to see that community involvement. And as Drew pointed out, we've got to get the strategy functioning, and then we can tick that box, if you like, and then we can apply for our Football Foundation and look throughout the district where we can drop those in.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
I think just talking a little bit more about the delivery side, obviously having a playing pitch strategy is going to help enormously for some of these targeted areas to get through planning, because obviously we all need to tick the boxes when we go through that. What about the wider aspects of things that aren't being called out in this playing pitch strategy that allow community engagement? So I'm thinking things like bowls, if they need to make planning changes, applications, someone wants to start up. Thinking also in particular parish that is in my ward, had a bit of a challenge with a pétanque court, which is basically just a sand pit 15 centimetres deep, and being given significant planning challenges on that area. It's now been taken over the parish council, but I'm sure there are other examples of community, call it sports. It is a sport, really. It's because it brings community together and it allows people to have exercise, depending on your ability. Whether the West Berkshire as a whole will be seen to be putting a positive spotlight on these applications.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. And it was interesting. I mentioned I was at this meeting hosted by Get Berkshire Active today. And what came across very clearly was the community value for all sorts of aspects like that. And they spoke quite clearly about the need for councils, local authorities, to actually look at, if I can put it this way, health and well-being across everything we do. It's all about the wider determinants of health. You mentioned, just getting together, some people playing pétanque or something like that. And so there is definitely a piece of work like that. And I took away from that meeting the fact that we can bring that to the council. But as far as this is concerned, the playing pitch strategy, it is referring obviously to, the sports of football, cricket, hockey, lacrosse, and rugby. so they're quite specific. That's the strategy. But for the wider piece, yes, I mean, we need to get people engaging more, to do anything, collaboratively and together. And I would like to think that that would be favourably viewed in planning terms, and maybe it's up to us as councillors to make sure that happens across the council. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you for that.
Okay. Any other comments from members or questions? Yes, Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you. I suppose my disappointment, which I articulated at the beginning of this session, revolves around there's no real meat to this. Now that, by the sound of what you're saying, is what was intended, which I find slightly disappointing. And I put this in the perspective of, we're told we need 7.4 artificial pitches now, growing to 9.7 by 2041. And I would risk hope that there'd been far more urgency in looking at where the options are. And that, bearing in mind that most grant applications tend to take 18 months, 2 years, we're basically out of time in this administration. And I think this could have been put forward earlier. I think that, as I say, could have had more meat on it and had some, just more direction. It's just a vague document to me. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Well, yes, I would just refer you back to the fact that it's a strategic document, and those three key areas of protect, enhance, provide, that is providing us with the direction of travel for implementing, if you like, things on the ground to do the tactical work. So I would, with the greatest respect, say I'm quite happy with it as a strategic document. Thank you. I think Mr. McHenry might want to come in.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that you're right, that the strategy does name the number of new HEPs or 3G pitches that will need to be implemented over the number of years, and it also names the sites at which they could be implemented. They didn't prioritise those so as not to kind of restrict if opportunities arose. So rather than saying this individual site should be your first 3G pitch, if some form of grant money comes forward in a different area and a 3G pitch is also needed in that area, it enables us to be able to move and use that grant funding and be able to fulfil a 3G pitch in that area that the grant funding has come forward in.
Ms. Pebbody?
I just want to make a comment about the timescale, and just to reiterate that we had originally were going to do a stage E refresh of the data, when we met with the local governing bodies and Sport England, and the feedback that we received was that actually we needed to do more than that, and we needed to do a complete relook and to do a new play and pitch strategy because things had changed. So we listened, and as a result of that, that's what took us to doing a whole new play and pitch strategy, which has obviously taken a bit longer, but we've done a very thorough job, and we did that on the basis of listening to those governing bodies.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay, I think we've gone through that quite thoroughly. So our role basically is to summarise the points to be forwarded on to executive. I've made a few notes here that I'll run through, and if I've missed anything, please do fill me in on that. Councillor Reid made the point about the need to maximise the local use of facilities, so not necessarily for people further away, but to make sure that we're using facilities for local people and that they're not empty. Some more clarity on where external funding might come from in the future would be really useful. Councillor McKinnon made the point facilities shouldn't just be for a specific club. We should be looking at a more generic use by as many different people as possible. Bearing in mind the clubhouse is in the council strategy, it would be good to get some more clarity about a timescale for when that might come to fruition. And it would also be good to be kept informed about the delivery plan timescale. We've been told by officers and by Councillor Foote that that would be online and that would be a means of tracking that. I think that's very important from the point of view of stakeholders and members of this council to be able to track that process. And then at any point where we feel like we might like to look at that again at scrutiny, we could do that, being informed by that delivery plan. Is there anything that I've missed, Councillor Reid?
I think on the lacrosse, I think it was somewhat unfair. If that's a seed that is going to grow into a sport that's going to be successful, could be used across the, it's women and men use it quite. I've seen it played quite a lot in other areas as well. It'd be great if it was played. We see sports like rugby. Unfortunately, I was a great rugby person, awful player, but I enjoyed it, running around randomly on the pitch. But I see the numbers going down since 2016. I think it's dropped 20% since there was about 260,000 members. Now it's closer to 200,000. So some sports may, become less of a need. Others, might start off. Who knows? Shinty might be a sport that would be. I can see Councillor Kittle. He's probably got childhood memories of Shinty, I'm guessing. So maybe not that one, but other sports coming in. So I think we should be bold in strategies to see if we can seed new sports, and if they go, then that's great. That's the strategy. But if they don't, then you move on with the strategy. You just update. So I think we should be bold. Otherwise, we may see that certain key sports slowly get smaller and smaller and smaller, like rugby. And then what do you do with those pitches, those spare clubhouses and bits and pieces?
Great, we'll take that on board as well. Any other comments from members? No. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed for your input into that item this evening. So we'll make sure that that's summarised and forwarded on to yourselves officially and the rest of the executive. We are 2 hours into the meeting. Could I propose we have a very short comfort break? Because I also want to give members and officers who are in the back row the opportunity to move into the front row for the next items, because I'm conscious that we've got more people in the back row than the front row now. So I'm happy to propose that. Seconded, yeah. All those in favour? Great. So if I could urge you, please just take 5 minutes and then come back with a sense of urgency, let's say, rather than taking an opportunity to have a chat in the corridor. Thank you. Fantastic. We're being broadcast again. Thank you very much, everybody. So we're now going to go on to item 5, which is the Environment Strategy Annual Report. And I would like to invite Councillor Stuart Gawley and officers to present on this, please. And just an apology to Kofi. I mentioned earlier that John Winstanley was here, but it is actually Kofi who's here. So thank you very much to you. Okay, over to you, Stuart.
Yeah, I think I'd highlight it as an upgrade, to be honest, just if John's watching online. Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Here to talk about the environment strategy, and also I know we're touching on a bit on biodiversity as well a bit later on. So yeah, I'll introduce this and then happy to field questions with Emily and Kofi. So this strategy before you this evening gives an update on activity undertaken between July 24 and July 25. So quite a while back, and it takes a while to collect all of the various bits of data. What you will be able to see from this is that the period covered in the update has seen significant delivery, and that delivery is really starting to bear fruit in terms of the carbon reduction that it brings to our council. 20% on last year alone and 38% on the baseline from 2019-2020. And with this, we've continued to demonstrate our environmental ambition and desire to save money and the environment. And we continue to expand our solar provision on council assets, and we continue to invest in the HVO fuel, the hydrogenated vegetable oil fuel in our waste fleet, which offsets, almost 90% of the kind of diesel emissions. And we're continuing to support the rollout of EV charging points across West Berks, alongside many other activities. And certainly on the EV charge point perspective, many members now across the council will have had emails over the last week with charge points, on-street charge points that will be coming to an area soon. So it's really ramping up now on that perspective for on-street as well as some of the off-street stuff that we've done in 25, 26. Alongside those projects, we've also continued to improve our curbside recycling offer. Recently looking at tubes, plastic tubes, and also batteries earlier in the year, and pots, tubs and trays earlier in the previous year as well. We've adopted a local transport plan, which is ambitious, certainly where we want to see more active travel in our urban areas, as well as improving those rural networks. And also the local plan as well, not to be forgotten in terms of its environmental aspects, significantly increases that focus on the environment, and also any mitigating activity that we can do to improve our environment. We've got a lot more planned and a lot more to come. We've started the significant decarbonisation works in the North Cross Leisure Centre. We've got solar PV on there at the moment, which is one part of that project, as well as the continued rollout of the solar PV at Padworth Household Waste Recycling Centre coming in the next couple of months, as well as the nutrient neutrality mitigation works across the River Lambourne, which we briefed an update to affected members for those wards last week, actually, which was an excellent update and started to flesh out what that kind of looks like in the real world, because it's a bit of a random name and it's a bit hard to articulate it. So we've started to do that now. We've got that way forward, and we'll be communicating that more widely to residents once we start to get spades in the ground on activity. This report also includes an update on our biodiversity activity to improve our position with regards to the ecological emergency that this council declared. And with this, we'll be soon launching our green and blue infrastructure framework internally across the council, which after a trial period, we hope to open up to volunteer groups and towns and parishes to help assist them as well. And also the council continues to run its successful community climate forum, which has grown out of the town and parish climate forum to help increase the network across towns and parishes, but also the vast majority of excellent volunteer groups that we have, and that shared learning that can be done, as well as what projects are out there, what funding opportunities are out there, and presentations from the council. It really is an excellent upgrade, I think, to the forum, the Town and Parish Climate Forum, and I'm looking forward to an in-person one very soon. And I am always keen to hear from volunteer groups and towns and parishes with the projects they're undertaking, and I'm keen to help from a council perspective as much as we possibly can. So please do reach out to myself or officers with your projects if you need any help as well. So finally, a thank you to the many officers, residents and volunteers that help to contribute to a better West Berkshire environment every day. I think this environment strategy gives an excellent update on where we are in terms of progress, especially on our pathway to net zero. And there is still much more to do, I think it's fair to say, absolutely is. But we are balancing that with the many other activities that as a council we need to continue to deliver. And, you know, like I said, this report gives an update on what we've done, but also what's coming.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gawley. Members, Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Gawley, for that report. Verbal update on the report, I would say, is an excellent. Thank you, officers. It's full of numbers, tables with numbers. It's good to read. Just a couple of questions on the electric charge points. You mentioned, Councillor Gawley. What I understand is, not in this document, but just doing research, is that not we as a council, but the provider is charging around a unit rate of kilowatt of 79p or something. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But my question is towards, if you're to encourage people to use that charging point instead of going to the nearby public or the Tesco's charge point, which is still cheaper, are we considering lowering the tariffs or working with vendors to see that, okay, the tariffs can be lowered, particularly the off-peak hours, because the off-peak Octopus, for example, charges 5p, not 79p. So that's something which I wanted to raise. And then the other point, not related to the EV, is on an overall, how far we are on the target for the net zero. In terms of not just percentage, but overall, which areas are lagging and you think like we should be improving on? Thank
you. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question in terms of the pence per kilowatt hour. I mean, I'll be completely frank, I still have a petrol car, albeit it's kind of a mild hybrid, but I don't have to charge it or anything. So I don't really understand how it all works to the best of my ability. What I do know, though, is that these organisations invest a lot up front in the infrastructure. And obviously they need to make sure that that cost is covered. And there is a bit where you get to where we couldn't deliver it solely as a council. I think of the charge points going in over the coming kind of months. We would struggle to deliver that volume of investment and the skills to deliver it. So we rely on that co-production effectively. And in return, I guess, they need to make sure they cover their costs as an organisation. I don't know if you've got any input on that, Kofi, Emily, in terms of how much control we actually have over what can be charged. It's a bit like we don't have control over what's charged at petrol stations. It's kind of market forces.
Yes, indeed. And also it's a commercial monitoring activity, because if they set it too high so that it is not being used at volume, then they will not be making any money from their investment. So whatever I set at now is not fixed in perpetuity. It's something that will be dynamically monitored and can be changed year on year to meet the needs of the market around them. So the starting point we benchmarked against other facilities in our neighborhood so that we pitch it at a competitive rate. And it's also important to note that speed of charging comes into play. So whilst there might be 5 pence to charge off-peak somewhere else, that speed might not be the same as some of the faster chargers that we've got, which are more tailored towards someone out to do some shopping and they've got to park for maybe 30 minutes and want to come back to see their battery at a reasonable charge level. So thank you for that question, and we'll keep learning as we go along in terms of what rates are competitive and drive the right customer behaviors.
Chairman, just to supplementary, thank you, Kofi, for that one. So all I wanted to emphasize on, if as a West Berkshire Council, we are seen as providing that service, although front-ending. So we don't want to be seen as profiting from that. So as long as you, from an officer's perspective, are able to review that and see that it's balanced and it's like not overcharging, that would be good. Yeah.
Before I bring in other members who've indicated, can I just jump in on the charger? A very quick question. Yes, Councillor Gawley, we've seen letters about the local charging points. Are parish councils and residents on the particular roads where you're thinking of putting these charging points, are they going to be consulted? So will a letter physically go through the door of those?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
We've also been emailing the parish councils as well when they're coming up in their area to inform them that this work's going to be going on. I think we're talking about 400 over the next couple of months.
Okay,
really.
so they will have time to give their feedback.
Yeah. It's a bit of an FYI. These are surveyed locations, and if there are any particular issues that come up, we'll deal with it on a case by case basis.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Sumner, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chair. I've long since been a supporter of the direction of travel for this strategy from the time that I was vice chair of it, I suppose. I think, you know, the direction of travel is still going in the right direction. Really happy with that side of things. A question with regards to EV points on Road 1 specifically, and again, something that was levied at us as administration with regards to designated spaces for the use of. And I say that noting that one of the posts that's been put in just around the corner from me has actually now also had a disabled bay marked up right by it. So that's great. But clearly that bay is designated to an individual, not to any general purpose use. I'm not asking for answers on it. I'm just asking you to be mindful of it. I suppose that the biggest thing for me, though, recognising the amount of work that goes into it, is that we're only 2 months away from doing the next report. My concern is that residents will look at this and think, this is not the right one, this is an old one, it's old news. How do we bring it forward so that I know you're not going to be able to do it in May for the year that's just gone, but, you know, 10 months on, it loses, for my mind, and I suspect the residents' minds, it loses a little bit of impetus and impact on what is essentially a good news story. How do we deal with that? How do we address that?
Yeah, I'll take that one first. I think you're absolutely right. I completely understand. We're still much better than the national ability to turn around the data in time. But yeah, and it is something I think as data gets easier to understand. And I think, you know, we've seen that through the life of this. I think it's probably fair to say, certainly since I've been portfolio holder, that the ability to get the data has got a lot quicker and is getting quicker. So yeah, completely understand the challenge there. So I do think it will continue to speed up and become more efficient, certainly around the carbon emissions. With regards to the first question about designated EV bays, it is something we're looking to do. So the next batch of parking amendments will include some kind of trials around this, so we can start to understand. What we want to do is gauge where usage is already good versus perhaps where usage may be poorer, to understand what the root cause of that lack of usage is. I'm very cautious with it, because I think we've got to strike that balance between encouraging usage of EVs, but also not disadvantaging those that don't have them. And I'm a good example where I don't have the ability to charge at home because I don't have a car park, a driveway, but I also don't have the ability to have one of these installed because I live on the A4. I mean, I'm happy to park on the A4 through Speed, but I think a lot of other people would probably be annoyed with me. So I think it's about finding that balance for me between looking at the data when we start using these sites in earnest. I know we've already got some installed, for example, from the previous batch of government funding, understanding where usage is low, looking at what the root cause of that low, is it because someone's parking in there and it's not getting used? And where can we make sure we strike that right balance between not blocking all of the highway, because people that don't have EVs will feel that they entitled to park on the highway like everybody else. It's getting that balance, but it is something we are strongly reviewing and looking to implement some trial sites soon, fairly soon.
I suppose, sorry, Chair, if I may, one of the other things that is worthy of note and probably needs your focus over the coming months is that the government currently seems to be hell bent on making EVs a less attractive option for people to use. I think it's an absolute disgrace, personally, that they've taken the attitude that they have. I've no doubt there will be a queue of people telling me why I'm wrong in that feeling. But is it something that you're looking at closely? Are you monitoring that? Do you think there's going to be a downturn, I suppose, is the issue?
Well, I mean, I'm no expert, but I don't think there will be, because I think there's still a positive outcome. I think it might slow because people will think twice. I don't necessarily think it will downturn. I think it might just slow the pace. And I think that's one thing I certainly see as someone that looks now for the green little flash on the number plates. The growth has been significant. So there is still a demand, I think, for EV charge points and infrastructure. I think there's a lot of questions to ask for around EVs in general. The wear and tear on the highway, the wear and tear on our car parks, are our multi-storey structurally able to cope with the extra weight, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there is a wider question around this, and there's going to become a point where, do you remember when we used to have, I never remembered it, but when we had leaded petrol, the red pump, and I was always a modern person, so I used a green pump. And then I was told a black pump was even better. And now I'm told the black pump's bad, so I go back to the green pump, and the red pump doesn't even exist anymore. So I think there's going to become that natural progression where we get to a tipping point, and we're going to have a lot more questions around EVs that come. I think from a council perspective, for me, it's really important that we provide the infrastructure in our car parks, on our highways in sensible locations, make sure we've got the access, and then to kind of Councillor Amafrage's point, make sure it's equitable in terms of how it's paid for and charged and delivered. I realise I didn't answer Councillor Amafrage's second question with regards to the carbon emissions. So if you'll permit me, Chair, I'll just go back to that one ever so quickly. So in terms of the carbon footprint, we're making very good progress, and it's in the environment strategy. And say we've reduced it by 38% on the baseline of 29-20, and 20% on last year, and on the current forecast. So if you take into account all of the committed projects that we've got as a council, we're currently forecasting a gap by 29-30 of 49 tonnes of CO2, which, considering when the council has started the journey, that was at 11,620, I think is a very good position to be in. And I have real assurance that we are absolutely on the right track. And I am fairly confident that between now and then, other projects will come out of the woodwork that will be able to contribute to that 49 tonne gap. I think we've got opportunity still to look at.
Thank you, Councillor Gawley. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. And actually, probably, Stuart, you've often said actually the hardest questions come from your own party, so you might not thank me for these, but it's the big questions that always come from those graphs that we see in this excellent report, which is around figure 3, 4 and 5. So figure 3, obviously the big ticket items are schools and colleges, leisure centres and offices. So the first question, if I can try and sneak 2 questions hidden in one question, is how are we investing in helping bring down those numbers? And as I mentioned, figure 4 and 5, you're already guessing what the question is, the big bet on Graiseley. And I'm hoping I've picked out the right colour, because I'm actually colourblind in the blue spectrum. So that kind of looks all the same colour, but I'm thinking that big bar has got to be Graiseley. So if you can expand a bit more on that risk and challenge we've got there as well.
Yeah, so I think on the schools and colleges, you're absolutely right. They're our biggest contributor in terms of CO2 emissions. And what I would say is we've over the last kind of 18 months, 2 years, rolled out a lot of solar on those sites, a significant number now. I can't remember the number of sites we've done in terms of schools, but probably near 20 odd. Yeah, with more in the pipeline. You know, and I think they say we've probably done 20 schools, and we're looking at all of our other assets as well in terms of what we can possibly squeeze into them. So that will help, and that a lot of that probably won't reflect in this because it's probably a bit old for a lot of the majority, I think, of them. And the same with leisure centres. Obviously, we've got the Northcroft, which is about £2.4 million decarbonisation project underway at the moment. Like I said, the first part is coming to kind of close in terms of the PV, and then the next part is around things like air source heat pumps, insulation, etc., etc. So there is a massive opportunities in there, and I think once we've finished with the solar on the schools, it'll be a case of what else can we deliver. You know, looking at the energy hierarchy around kind of that insulation piece, making sure we don't lose energy in the first place from them would be key, and that's a key part of that decarbonisation project as well at Northcroft. So a lot of work there. And in terms of Graiseley, yes, absolutely, we remain committed to Graiseley, and it very much still forms part of this strategy. The business case is being reviewed at current, and we are looking at the most efficient way to be able to deliver that scheme so it remains viable, both economically and also environmentally.
Just so I'm hearing that potentially that steep slope I'm seeing in the graph is going to go a little bit to the right. Hopefully not too far to the right.
You're right. It will go to the right a wee bit. Yes.
Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, just following on that from Councillor Reid, thanks, Chairman. When will that business case be updated, and when can we expect to see some movement?
Yeah, that's fair, and you know, I remain committed to bring that to executive when we're in that right place. It will. I would envisage it will be likely after the summer, so into the kind of second half of the calendar year. We would look to bring something through. We are, like I said, we're looking at a number of options to deliver it more efficiently to make sure we get the right bang for buck for residents. Very cognizant that it is a big spend, but I know that both yours and the previous and our administration, remain committed to seeing it delivered. But it has to be economically viable, so we need to look at how we deliver it in the most efficient way possible. But I would confidently say in the second half of this year we will have a proposal come through to exec, which I hope receives support from both sides.
And that is in our work programme as well. So yeah, we'll look at that in more detail then. Any other questions or comments, members? Councillor Coyle.
Just an element I'm a bit struggling to understand. In the graph at figure 5, it talks about schools becoming academies. This is in terms of meeting net zero. Am I understanding correctly that that's as in that it no longer contributing to our carbon footprint, and therefore, so I understand why it has to be included, because it does make a net difference to our carbon footprint, but it obviously doesn't mean that anything positive is happening with those schools and their carbon footprints. So I just wondered to what extent we try and continue to have conversations with the academy schools about things like solar panels on the roofs, because it's not just about moving something over there and forgetting about it, hopefully.
No, I think it's a very fair point to make, and I would actively encourage any school, whether it's an academy or maintained, to look at how they can reduce their carbon emissions. And I think that's one thing that we do have is a lot of experience now in delivering projects via our excellent partners, and more than happy to have those conversations with academies around this. I don't know if it's something we've actively do, but certainly open to have those conversations, and whether there's a bulk procurement process that we could go through to support them, again, happy to have those conversations. But yeah.
I'd just really like to say that it would be good if we did, because you've mentioned that they're a really big part of the carbon footprint, so we don't want them to just to trail off as they academise.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Wollaston.
It's a very quick one, Chair. To thank Councillor Gawley on behalf of my residents about the nutrient neutrality meeting we had the other week. Very, very useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, really good to hear. And I think I really look forward to be able to explain more to residents as this scheme progresses, because I think it's an excellent opportunity in the Lambourne Valley to really reinvest it and unlock the much needed development as well, for sure, but in the right way, and putting that onus back onto developers. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid.
I know in the past that council has looked at other alternative energy sources or zero carbon energy sources. Are those explorations still ongoing, or are we fairly confident that this is the strategy that pass forward now, or are there other areas that we can explore?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I mean, we often get challenged around like micro hydro, considering we have so much water around West Berkshire. And the feedback we had last time from consultants that helped us look at, the return on investment is that solar at the moment is the cheaper way to deliver clean energy. I would absolutely never say never. I mean, I would love to see many small micro hydro plants along the many waterways that fill up my inbox for many other reasons, mostly because there's too much water. And it frustrates me that we can't harness that in an efficient way, a cost-effective way at this point in time. But I do hope in the future we will be able to relook at that again and see whether that return on investment changes in terms of efficiency.
Is there any opportunity for biogas? I know the firm I work for works in fibre, I should say. I shouldn't say carbon fibre because it's the wrong term. Fibre, and they have biogas plants on site. They tend to be quite low energy production out of the whole facility, then 5-6%. Is that something that also could be used? Because we do collect a huge amount of high quality food waste, which obviously we make into the actual soil conditioner. I'm just wondering if that actually produces any form of gas that could be used and be seen as a way of, being a lower source of carbon.
Kofi, this is probably one for you.
Yes, indeed. So in terms of how we currently treat food waste, we use the universal composting plant, into which the council has already invested significant capital with our partners Veolia. So it's almost cost neutral to keep using that facility at least until the expiry of the contract in 2032. But beyond then, there are possibilities of exploring alternatives such as anaerobic digestion, in which case we'll separate the treatment of garden waste from food. So we can use a simpler open windrow for garden waste, for example. But the thing with anaerobic digestion is you need economies of scale. So our food waste tonnages alone will not justify the investment needed. However, in the future, if Ridgeway becomes a possibility, or for example, working across boundaries with some of our Berkshire and Oxfordshire partners, we can co-invest in a suitably sized anaerobic digestion plant, which then can give us the ability to generate biogas, which can either be fed into the national gas grid or burned to generate heat and electricity. So thank you for that suggestion. It's something on our minds for the not too distant future.
Great, very interesting. Any other comments, questions? No. Okay, I've got a few points that I'd like to make, or questions, I should say. I note that we don't have any budget for this financial year for any more tree planting. Do we have a budget for the watering of the trees that we've put in before? Because I'm very conscious that we've had very dry weather recently, and we've mentioned earlier about drought with regard to playing pitches and so on. So is there a strategy to make sure we don't lose what we've already put in the ground?
Thank you, Chen. Another great question. Yeah, certainly we aspire to look after the trees we've already planted. I know in the not too distant past, some of the trees we planted perished under the heat wave. We'll hope to do better this time round. One way that I'm discussing with colleagues is to work with local communities, because it's very cost prohibitive for the council to hire a contractor with a bowser to go around. However, if someone lives near a tree, they can adopt it, quote unquote, and maybe put a jerry can of water maybe once a day or every other day. And it's a way of spreading the load and giving the community some partnership and a stake in looking after their natural environment. So those are some of the options we are looking to publicize and help the community to work with us to look after the trees we've planted. And similarly, yeah, you're right that we don't regrettably have the budget to plant as many trees as we were hoping to. However, we are hoping to use the little budget we've got more flexibly. For example, we have plans in motion to work with the unpaid work part of the probation service, whereby if we can source tree saplings at an affordable rate, we'll work with them. Also bring some of our staff along using our volunteer days to go and plant, which will reduce the costs as opposed to if we were to let contractors plant it on our behalf. So we're trying our best to let the little money we've got go as far as practicable.
Great, thank you very much. I know there's a lot of local groups that are doing great work in this area, like Lockdown Woods, etc. If we're going to work with others about the watering, can we make sure that we do that in a very proactive way and just say, look, we really can't look after this, can you do it? Because if A thinks B's doing it and B thinks A's doing it and then the trees die, it's too late. So I would encourage a very sort of proactive early discussion about that, if that's possible.
Well noted, Chair.
Fantastic, thank you very much. With the BioCap project, with the partnership, is this going beyond Sulham at the moment? Because I know some really good work has been done there. Is it being expanded further geographically?
Thank you, Chair. So at the moment, it isn't, but we are still meeting as a group, the Natural Delivery Partnership, the nature with that group, and hopefully things will come out of that that we can learn from and look to take forward in the future. But at the moment, there's no significant plans.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the natural capital market for biodiversity, which I think has been postponed, I think was the word for the time being. Is that something that we're hoping to resurrect in the future?
It absolutely is. So as part of our work through the nutrient mitigation, we're looking to deliver some co-benefits for that. And that will include around projects around BNG and using some little funding that we do have to support that going forward. So that is something we're going to use the framework of the nutrient mitigation programme to hopefully deliver in the future.
Thank you. And just finally, you mentioned the Green-Blue Infrastructure Framework and you said that will be published. Do you know what the time frame for that is, please?
So we are doing an internal trial for 6 months. We are just finalising some small changes following executive briefing, and then that will be communicated to officers. Then we'll hold the 6-month trial, and then following that 6-month trial, we'll be able to publish it on our website for our community to hopefully get inspired from.
Great. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? No, right. I shall aim to summarise then. So the point was made that it'd be good to have an annual report sooner in the year rather than further down the line when we're very close to it being refreshed. Councillor Gawley made the point about the data and hopefully in future that will come through quicker. But I think it's worth making that point that it would be good to have the reports earlier in the year. We are looking at the business case for Graiseley when that comes through the pipe at this meeting. Councillor Crawl made the point about working with academies and ensuring the fact that just because they're no longer part of the local education authority, they aren't seen as a reduction in the carbon, that we actually work proactively with them and see if we can get some economies of scale for the kind of decarbonisation that they're trying to achieve. And then the proactive approach to watering as well. Is there anything that I've missed, colleagues? No. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Mr. Chard will summarise that and share it with everyone concerned. So that brings us to the end of that item. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your patience sitting through the rest of the meeting. Much appreciated. And we shall now move on to item 6, which is the procurement governance paper. So I'd like to invite Martin Sargent and Richard Howroyd to present this. Thank you. Yes. Oh, I beg your pardon. Is that Councillor Paul? Yeah, fantastic. Hello.
Hello, Chair.
Would you like to introduce on this, Councillor Paul?
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you. So as I understand this request itself, this is a request that's been made by a member of the public expressing concern that our usual level of transparency had not been maintained over selected contract sizes. And over the last 12 months, the council has been moving slowly but surely towards Public Procurement Act 2023, which has been an iterative process. And we've been adopting items as they've gone through internal governance. Many of the items that this resident has observed will be addressed in the new procurement strategy, which is due for imminent release in the next month or so. The core of their question relates to a process change that was enacted under the previous administration in order to speed up procurement and not delay contract awards whilst waiting for the executive. And I do believe the Public Procurement Act will tighten up this process, making it more timely overall. And just to add, before we move on to the officers, Chair, our procurement policy, when it comes through, will be put forward to scrutiny. And I'm very, very pleased to hear the officers supporting this in order to get scrutiny's feedback, which would be a valued part of this process moving forward. I'd like to hand over to the officers now for any other comments before we move into the floor. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, nothing. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Members, do you have questions? Councillor Matharaj.
Thank you, Councillor Poole. It's not a question, and I think combined with a question and a suggestion, what you suggested that we can provide from scrutiny is that from a procurement perspective, we touched upon the last scrutiny. We heard from Mr. Howard. We leave it to the wisdom of the procurement. I argued in that meeting that the procurement team would be best advised to look at the procurement process and improvements, and also more importantly, look at the vendors from a procurement angle rather than just bringing them into a meeting with like us politicians looking at it from a different angle. Where I'm coming from is where you're looking at the multiple vendors and looking at the processes. What is that from a procurement perspective to look at? And that's the first question I'm making, and then suggestion followed up by that. Is that what is that the main criteria in terms of getting some discounts or value for money? The priority for the procurement process. And then from a suggestion point of view, let's say, for example, a vendor comes in and says that I'm in that process of providing you that service in one area, and then the other service area, let's say from a adult social service or maybe another service area within the council, they might be providing other service through their other subsidiary or whatever. What is the process to bring all together and kind of get some discounts value from the same vendor? Because on one place they could be just inflating the price, and then the other area they could be at a cutthroat price. So it's just trying to see that the optimization with the vendor side of things.
Thank you for that one. So firstly, I think I probably just need to point out that public procurement is highly regulated. We do a lot of spend analysis, so we understand who we're spending with. We understand the different suppliers supplying the same things, and we look at aggregation and disaggregation of contracts. So the basic principle is that once we are spending traditionally over a 4-year period above threshold, we are subject to the full force of the Procurement Act, which means we have got to either go out for a full tender in line with the Procurement Act, or we go to a framework, depending on what we're doing. In terms of negotiation, under the Procurement Act 2023, there is far more scope for negotiation as part of the tender processes. So using the competitive flexible procedure, which is the recommended process, we will do that. In terms of things where the spend is below threshold, we have a lot more scope to do negotiation from that point of view. But again, it's about openness, transparency, and being fair to all parties. So, for example, again, under the new Act, conflict of interest forms have to be filled in throughout the process. We are going to be introducing some changes as part of the new procurement strategy, which Councillor Paul quite rightly has pointed out will be coming to executive within the next month or so. So we will be announcing some changes, and I think you're making some very valid points. I think traditionally negotiation hasn't been that good in any local authority. I think people have been scared to do it, and it's now easier to do.
Chairman, if I may follow up with a question or suggestion. So thank you, Mr. Hoyroyd, for that point. Like from a negotiation point of view, it's not you within the framework of the Procurement Act. You're right, and thanks for confirming that. So can I please suggest that if you could incorporate that outcome of the negotiation in terms of value addition or discounts in a layman's term, so we could see that if it is within outside of the preview of the part 2, if it is allowed, we could see that you started at point A with the price or bidding price, and then post that bidding, negotiation with the vendors and achieve this discount. That would give us a kind of a view in terms of how the council has, or how the negotiation team or procurement team had a discount or something. So.
Yeah, thank you. I think we can attempt to do some of that, but it is very much market dependent as to how much we can do negotiation. And one of the issues that has been raised about negotiation, especially on the higher value contracts, is quite often it can really delay the process if we're not careful, because quite often it then means it has to go back to a board at the organisation that has submitted the bid for approval. So we just need to think very carefully about our negotiation strategies going forward. So I certainly think at below threshold, it's far easier to do. We need to think of other methods in terms of getting best value in terms of post-tender negotiations. And certainly when I've worked on some very large contracts in the past, that's been very key parts of the process. So then we're talking sort of like 100 million, 200 million pound projects. The reality for West Berkshire is we have very few what I would call exceptionally large contracts, because there are new rules around any contracts over 5 million in terms of reporting, but we have very few. I think our highways contract, our waste contracts, they're pretty much the largest ones we've got, apart from some social care contracts, which are, to be honest, a very different beast. So, yeah, no, we can look at it.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation, actually, having been part of the group of members that has been included in the term contract process. So on point 4, page 277 of our pack, that's not the way that things were explained to us at the last meeting that we had last week. My understanding was we were looking at an individual decision. So clearly you may need to go away and discuss that, but just as an example, that isn't my understanding from a conversation less than a week ago.
It depends on the process. It depends on how it's been incorporated. On the highways process, I don't believe an additional negotiation stage was built into the process. But it can be under the competitive flexible procedure now.
Which I accept, but you're using it as an example of the way that something's being done, and I don't believe this is the way it's being done for this one. And as you rightly said, it is one of the biggest contracts financially. I don't believe it's we asked for it to come through to members, and my understanding of the outcome of the conversation was that it was going to be an officer decision, delegated authority. I'm not expecting you to be able to say yay or nay, but it's just a point of information that you might want to look at.
No, certainly in terms of the highways, we've agreed specifically that we will take the decision back to a separate meeting, but clearly in terms to inform you, I'm trying to work out exactly what we're asking here. Sorry. Councillor Brooks.
Yeah. Councillor Brooks.
What I'm expecting to see, and maybe I'm going to be a bit disappointed, is that the term contract is let at an executive meeting. So all the work will be done. We will be bringing to an executive meeting the approved, preferred, selected bidder. It will be in public. Your side, the opposition, this side of the room will be able to ask questions as that goes through that process.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that then be able to be called in, the MO will tell us, but you know, it's not an ID. ID is not behind closed doors anyway, but it's not an ID.
No, and I think it was more of a delegated authority than it was an ID. It may be my understanding of the closing off of the process. The conversation may have been more around the award. I'm just conscious that what we're putting out there is a response to a point that was raised, and I'm hoping I'm making it clear.
Yeah.
You're making it very clear. Okay. But your words and the written information in front of me and what was being discussed, if they're not aligned, then there will obviously be question raised. So all I'm saying is that wasn't my understanding of it. My understanding may be wrong. I think it would be worth getting clarity. If that's the way that you want it to be done anyway as leader, and everybody supports that, then that obviously is your prerogative. I'm not disputing that as a way forward or a need. I'm just stating a concern that that wasn't my understanding of the conversation that we had last week. So if this is going public, which it has done, for your benefit, everything needs to be clear. And if it's just my understanding, which is erroneous, so be it.
I hope the officers have taken what I've said in earnest.
Mrs. Clark.
I think just to clarify that there is an extraordinary executive scheduled for the 11th of June, and the purpose of that was to schedule it to tie in directly to the award of the highways term maintenance contracts. So that was scheduled for that purpose because we are in effect in that procurement process. So just to clarify, it is on the forward plan and it will be determined by members on that date. There may well be a part 2 element to the report, but there will be a part 1 report as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Any other comments, questions, members? Under the final paragraph, let's have a look. Paragraph 5.1, we have 4 questions that we need to address. So can scrutiny request that all future contracts for high value contracts must be supported by a formal and detailed written report? So we're basically being asked in this paper for our view on whether we think we should recommend these things. So do we think that we should have a more formal and detailed report in the future? I know the member of the public, when we suspended standing orders for them to speak, they made the case that they felt that there weren't business cases coming forward for some of these projects, and therefore there wasn't sight of the cost benefit and the risks and so on that stakeholders and members could look at. Councillor Coyle.
I just wonder, because it's mentioned a couple of times that there's a new strategy coming forward anyway. So I just wonder if this is maybe premature. I'm not being dismissive of what the member of the public has said, but maybe it's premature because maybe we'd want to see what that says, and maybe some of these issues are addressed, or certainly that there's going to be changes that we need to take account of these questions once we've seen that, perhaps. Apart from maybe the second one, which is a backward-looking one. But
I
certainly
think
the
there's an issue here. So we're not only looking at procurement and procurement process and strategy and so on, but it's also business cases for big projects. So that would be the starting point. Why should we do this big project? Is it a good idea? Is it not a good idea? Cost benefit analysis, risks, etc. And then obviously you would use your procurement strategy to perform the correct process to go forwards from there. So it's just a case of do scrutiny members think that we ought to be asking for more detail ahead of the contract and procurement process? Are there any thoughts on that? Councillor Sumner.
I don't think it's an unreasonable ask from our point of view, but I'm mindful that the information that comes out of a procurement process or a tender process is not always open to public information. Some of it may be commercially confident. So I think asking the question and being mindful of that and the answers that we might get back is something that we might have to adopt as a position.
Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding, there were probably 25 reports in the last 3 years relating to contract awards for over 2.5 million, with no business case or full budget. Now, the Executive Director place said that they existed, but they don't seem to be given into the public domain.
Do officers have any comments on that? Councillor Brooks, I see your hand.
I think business cases come through, take for instance, schools programme. There's a lot of projects in schools programme, a lot of money spent. Business case will come forward as a package within the budget. This is all the capital we're going to spend on our business estate, on our schools estate, I should say. So those business cases are made there. Procurement then just does its job. So I think the questioner here is saying, I want to see the business case at the time of procurement. That's already done. We've already agreed and sort of signed it off through executive or through budget. And so that's where it's captured. I don't feel the need necessarily, but the committee may wish executive to think otherwise, that at the point that we're going out to procure the service, we need to then articulate the whole business case again. I think that's clunky. I'm happy to look at the information that is provided. I'm thinking in my mind of all the projects that are going on at the moment. 25 in 3 years is only 8 a year, around about 30 projects going on. But of those 25, I think it's possibly true to say that several years ago, there was more detail on the business case, and I'll certainly look at that. And nothing to hide here, but say, look, this is why we're doing it. This is what it's going to, we think it'll cost, this is the payback on it. But then, of course, it goes in the procurement. That's a separate process, really. I hope that's helpful. There's a few things to think about.
Through you, Chair. I was thinking not so much of school estates, but commercial issues.
You know, I'll look at it. But when I look at those projects in my mind, you know, 60% of them are probably schools, but I'll have a look at it.
Mr. Howroyd.
I was just going to say, one of the things I'm reviewing as part of the strategy is the gateway processes. So it's already pretty much aligned with the standard government gateway process. So gateway 2 is in effect agreement to take to procurement. Gateway 1 is agreement of business case, etc. So I want to clarify those within the organisation, within my contract management strategy going forward. So I think that will improve the governance. So it's all about joining things up and making them transparent from that point of view. Except I do agree with Councillor Brooks that the reality is I expect the business case to have been agreed normally by the strategic directors, in liaison with members, etc., before it even gets to my team to carry out a covered procurement under the Procurement Act.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, can Scrutiny undertake a review of why forthcoming contract awards since July 2023 is now part 2? Personally, I'm not sure that we need to do a review of something like that. I don't know whether it would be a job for Scrutiny. Mr. Howell, did I see your hand?
Well, I was just going to say, I'm new to the organisation, and when this I saw this recommendation, I asked my team to provide me with copies of all the procurements over 2 million for me to review. And I was fairly comfortable that there was pretty good governance and documentation to support everything. The reality is, under the old procurement regulation, so that's the Public Contract Regulations 2015, there was always the requirement to produce what's known as a Regulation 84 report. So this is a report that has to stand in the background in case there is a legal challenge or if there is a complaint made to the Cabinet Office. And I was pretty comfortable that we were covered on everything there. So my suggestion is there any benefit going backwards? I'd probably agree with the chair. I don't think there's that much benefit. I'd much prefer to get you involved in the process going forward in terms of looking at forward plans and working with you more collaboratively. I think that would be more positive.
I think Councillor Brooks's point about thinking about providing more information at an earlier stage would help to address that going forwards, I think. Okay. Can Scrutiny clarify and document the approval process required to approve large contracts? I would assume that that's in the Constitution, and we perhaps need, I think it would be useful if we could have more information about that, if someone can just give an explanation of where that is in the Constitution so that the member of the public can be pointed to that information. I think that would be helpful. Do members have any other comments to make on that particular point? No. Okay.
Chair, if I
Yes.
might, we are doing some training with officers at the moment with regards to the changes in the Constitution.
Okay.
And I'm more than happy to share with members copies of the training, because I think it will explain exactly how it works in a little bit more detail to the Constitution. And I'm more than happy to put that on our website at some time up to, so that members of the public can see it.
So that's training for members, but something that could be publicly
Yeah, so this is
viewable.
training we've already provided for executive officers. So in effect, we're going to be rolling it out further to officers at all levels so that they understand their roles.
Thank you for that. And then can Scrutiny recommend that all contracts over 2.5 million are once again individually highlighted on the forward plan and not under the generic title contracts for award under delegated authority from executive? Thoughts, comments? No? Anything from officers on that?
I'm more than happy to highlight them. It's just, you've just got to remember, in terms of transparency, in terms of process, we've got a very legalistic process. So sometimes in terms of mobilisation, the timetables can be quite tight. So I agree with Councillor Brooks. We need to come and share information far earlier with you and probably get you involved in things like specifications, rather than what I would call the more legalistic process, where at the end of the day, you can't have any impact in reality once we're at the award process time.
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, 2.5 million is quite a high figure, so I don't think it would be unreasonable to have that on the forward plan so that we can see what's coming through, if members are agreeable with that. Yep. Any other comments No, okay. So to summarise, Councillor Brooks said that he'd be happy to provide more information at an earlier stage in the future on some of these projects. Mr Howard has some training that he's done for members of executive that he can share more widely. Some clarification on the Constitution from officers would be really helpful. And maybe if we think there's anything that's not in the Constitution or needs tweaking or whatever, if we could have some clarity and transparency about that, that would be helpful, because maybe that's where some of the confusion has lain, that people have read it and perhaps don't understand it, and that we will have contracts over 2.5 million in the forward plan so that we can see what's coming through.
That's a recommendation, not an agreement.
Yep. Okay.
Chair, I was going to say one of the things we do need to do is review the contract standing orders. So that will go through the constitutional review group. Is that the correct one? So clearly that's a cross-party group. So we would welcome input from Scrutiny as well from that point of view.
Okay. And what was that? Sorry, the contract? Standing orders.
So clearly contract standing orders have to be agreed by full council. So there is quite a process. So this is a great opportunity to review what's in them and make any changes going forward.
Okay, great, thank you. Good, thank you very much indeed for that. Excellent. Right, last but not least, item 7, task and finish group guidance. I'd like to invite Martin Sargent to comment on this. Do you want to put your microphone on? Yeah.
I think Councillor Paul's got some brief remarks.
Sorry, Councillor Paul, over to you.
No, that's quite all right. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Martin Sargent. So item 7, last on the reports tonight. So this relates to a previous task and finish group. The committee suggested it would be helpful to have additional guidance about how the task and finish groups should operate. So the officers and I are here tonight to facilitate that conversation.
Anything from officers? No? Okay. Right, so this was an action that arose after we had the Sports Hub report, and there was differences of opinion about how long the report should be and how many recommendations and so on. And we realised as a committee that we could benefit from some more detailed guidance going forward on task and finish processes. That was an action that arose from this committee, and the action was that the 3 chairs of scrutiny would work with officers to produce that guidance. We as a committee, the originator of that action, have not yet had an opportunity to look at the feedback from the 3 chairs and the document that was written by the officers. Now, I'm conscious it's been to Constitution Review Task Group. It is due to go to Corporate Board and to Executive Briefing. But I have said to officers, we do need to have a look at it at this committee because it originated with us. So I am very keen that we resolve that we will bring that item to a meeting and that we will look at that document and look at the feedback from the chairman. Because I think, frankly, it would probably be a waste of Corporate Board and Executive Briefing's time if you look at it, think great, and then we look at it and say, actually, we think this should be changed, because then you have to go through the whole process again, which I think is not a good use of anyone's time. Mrs. Clark.
Yeah, just to confirm that the recommendations and the updated guidance was actually at Corporate Board this morning. So it would go to Executive Briefing and then it would be scheduled then to go to the next Governance Committee before going to Council, I think, in July. So I think that's the current trajectory for it. It was my understanding that it had been shared with the 3 chairs of scrutiny committees and no feedback had been provided. And all I would say is I think it is guidance that has been taken from the statutory guidance. So hopefully on that basis, it wouldn't be controversial. But yeah, just to confirm that that's the current status of that document.
Thank you. I did share with officers concerned that there was feedback and we wanted to look at it at this committee with the document that had been written by officers so that we could comment on the document and give our feedback before that went on. So thank you for the clarification about the pipeline of meetings, but that still doesn't allow time for this committee to discuss this before it goes on to governance and then to full council. And that's what concerns me. It's not that we want to comment on something that someone else has discussed. It actually originated from this committee as an action point. So I think it would be, what do other members think? Would they like to look at this as members of this scrutiny committee? Councillor
Chair,
Reid.
I think that can help very quickly if you perhaps will look over my way and avoid a long debate. I'm quite comfortable once it's been to exec briefing that the chairs of the three scrutiny committees see it. You can then bring it back here if you want to, and it will work its way through CRTG, but I think you've got the ability to comment on it outside of a bureaucratic meeting process. Why can't we do it informally with the chairs of the
Well,
three
with the
scrutiny committees?
greatest respect, Leader, I don't think this is a bureaucratic process. I think it's the democratic right of this committee to
You
discuss that
misunderstand me.
guidance.
I'm talking about corporate board, executive briefing, CRTG, governance committee. I wasn't talking about your committee.
What do members think? Would you like to have a look at this, or are you happy to just give informal feedback, Councillor Reid?
I mean, if it's the same feedback, if it's the same direction that was given for the task and finish group for the project management, it seemed very logical, but we'd need would need sight of that is the same. I think it would be worth a discussion. I think we can probably do both. We can do an informal feedback just so we get comfortable with it as a group, and then maybe come here to effectively give our blessing or various other any comments for change formally, which that can easily be done in a 10-12 minute section rather than a major section for discussion.
Any other comments from members? No. Okay. Yes.
Could it not come to your next meeting on the 16th of June?
Yeah, that's what I want to do, basically. I want
Yeah.
us to be able to discuss it, absolutely.
The leader suggested it can go to exec briefing, it can come here.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is it's already been to corporate board and it's due to go to exec. And if it comes to us in June, does that mean that a corporate board have to look at it again? I mean, I just want us to follow a process that works for everybody and we don't have to go around in circles. Leader.
Well, Mr. Sergeant, when would you expect to come to executive briefing, please?
I think subject to corporate board this morning, there's no reason why it's not ready to come.
It will come to the next.
When's the next one?
The 28th of May.
Okay, you'll have it ready for your next meeting.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of our meeting this evening. Thank you very much to all of the members and officers for your constructive conversations this evening. Please remain seated until the host has confirmed the meeting is no longer being live streamed, and we will see you at the next meeting. Thank you.